Well, good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon to Jacob Hill-Gowing, the legend coming towards the end of a 3,500 kilometre self-voyage of discovery in his one-bedroom flat. Jacob, you did 160k last night, just a mere ton to go, big boy. 28 years young, you're in your physical prime, the peak of your prowess and powers. And can you believe that this afternoon, hopefully in a little under 4 hours or so, that this is all going to be over?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit mad. I mean, 41 days, getting on the bike, no rest for the wicked, as they say. But yeah, it's nuts, absolutely insane that, getting on the bike and doing the first ride of 45k, then obviously getting up to 160 last night and 100k to do today. It's just mad.
Well, it really seems to have captured people's imagination, including ours at Lockdown Live, which is why we wanted to volunteer to help you finish this epic journey. And what I love about this, by your own admission, I'm not going to say you were saying you were a fat lad, but you weren't exactly in tip-top shape. You hadn't ridden a bike outside for something like 7 or 12 years, I think you said. And you've really captured people's imagination. And I think also it sounds as though living on your own in a one-bed flat, mentally, having this physical exertion every day has actually helped you as well, on a personal level, as well as raising the money for the Big Issue Foundation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think everyone's been going a bit stir crazy. But this is kind of, it's been a way of like doing a bit of good, but remaining sane. Yeah, I mean, it's, just the routine of getting on the bike every day, going to work, working at home, and then getting on the bike every day has really helped me to maintain my mental health, especially living alone. I was a bit worried about it to begin with, but actually this has really helped. I did have the other day, someone at work said I looked about half the size, which I thought was a bit insulting. Like before, but I mean, you might be able to tell that this yellow jersey is a couple of sizes too small. I was hoping I'd fit into it by now, but it's all for a good cause. So I don't mind looking like a plonker for a little bit.
I don't think you look like a plonker at all. I think this is one of the uplifting stories. Later on this afternoon, just to kind of tee you up, if you are tuning in for the long haul here with Jacob, or whether you're just tucking in for the first 10 minutes and then you're going to finish your day's work and come back and join us sometime between, say, 5:15 and 6 p.m. when this epic is due to come to an end. It's one of the uplifting elements, I think, of lockdown, that people have decided to take matters into their own hands and be as positive and physically active as they can, even within the confines of their own home. So I don't think you look silly at all. And by the way, also, if you're tuning in, you might be able to make out, I can't see the individual kilometre markers clearly, but you'll see the black writing on the whiteboard just to the left of picture to Jacob's right. And that, I believe, is your own personal record of every single one of the 40 rides that's preceded this one.
Yeah, it's been a bit like being in prison, like counting down the days. So I've kind of been documenting, online, on Instagram, at the Tour de Flat. I think it's been a bit mad. We're getting into the time of year when everyone would have been doing their fun runs and stuff like that, and that's all been kind of knocked on the head. So it's good to do something in that vein. I mean, yeah, this on my right is just a reminder of how far I've come and more importantly, how long is left to go. And I can't tell you how satisfying it's been just watching that big number there in front of those little ones going down week by week, from 3 to 2 to 1, and now, down to the last 100 kilometres. It's amazing, really.
Well, I reckon you must be into double digits now. Are you on 99 or 98?
98 left to go.
Well, there you go. You're down to two figures, which is sensational. By the way, Jacob, we'll carry on talking to you throughout the afternoon. We're going to be hearing from some great personalities, some of whom are out and out cycling experts, and some of whom have just helped the publicity campaign as you try and get your tally up towards 10 grand. As I turn away from you just for a second to double check my iPad, 8,246. We are 82% of the way there. 319 supporters. And one of the people who's been very vocal, literally on the radio, co-hosting the Scott Mills show, is Chris Stark. And Chris joins us now for 15 or 20 minutes or so. So, Chris, thank you ever so much for your time. You've already interviewed Jacob, and he's just said to me before you joined us or when you were on mute that he feels a bit of a plonker. And I've absolutely reiterated what you've done already on air, I'm sure. There's nothing silly about this. These are the kind of inspirational, uplifting stories that have kept us smiling through a very strange time.
Yeah, good afternoon. Hello, Rob. And also, hello, Jacob. You're doing an amazing job. You know, I keep telling you that. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, Rob. It's people like yourself, Jacob, that decide to go and do something from nothing and then give us all something to get behind and rally behind for an amazing cause. And obviously, I've been very, very proud to be part of telling your story. I get what you mean in that, you know, what a ridiculous thing to set yourself to do. There's no real need for you to do it, you know. You didn't have to do this. So in that sense, it's a little bit unusual, but you can't ever mistake the unusual with the stupid or the silly or being a plonker, because you're not. You're a very clever bloke, because what you've done here is, like anyone who's made something from nothing, you've created something so amazing, so beautiful in a weird kind of way. And yeah, it's something that's been on my mind a lot whilst you've been doing this Tour de Flat. I've been thinking about it a lot. And that's the sign of something very, very special, something we can all buy into. And ultimately, Jacob, it's for an amazing cause, and you should be so proud of what you're doing and what you continue to do. And I love that you've got Rob involved today as well. You got the main man.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I've been incredibly lucky with the support, you know, like and Scott and Rob. There's like so many people I want to, you know, thank for getting behind this, because you're right, it is an absolutely amazing cause and one that is, you know, incredibly needed at this time. But yeah, just, you know, as I've said time and time again, just thank you so much for your continued support.
Yeah, well, no, it's our pleasure. So in case people don't know, like, me and Scott do a show on 5 Live, and we try and get as many people's stories. And what's incredible about this time is it really shows how great people are all over the UK, and what's been so heartwarming, I think, and this is kind of shown through Tour de Flat, which is one of the best names ever, by the way, is that there's so many people who want to do good and do nice things, and then I think just day-to-day life gets in front of us all and gets in the way a little bit, and people who want to do these great things maybe put it off, maybe just, as I said, life gets in the way. And actually, for those people that have had a bit of a pause or things have slowed down slightly, it's been amazing seeing how many people then use that valuable time that they have, because time is so valuable, to go and do something as good as this. And it's stories like yours that we've been hearing a lot from on 5 Live and Radio 1. But you are very special people if you're that type of person that goes and does it, because ultimately I can't do what you're doing. I couldn't be on the bike for as long as you've done. However, I feel really good that I can donate to this cause, because then I feel better about myself a little bit and how inadequate I am compared to people like yourself, Jacob. So it's a good excuse for me and other people like me to feel a tiny bit better by, you know, slinging you the cost of a couple of beers, you know, which in London, however much I miss the pubs, was about £5-6 a beer. So I'm happy to throw a couple of beers your way, and then feel a bit better. And that's what you're doing. You're kind of leading the charge on this. However, we can all do our bit as part of your challenge just by chipping in a little bit. It's such a good idea. Do you know what? The cause as well, it's a fascinating one. And I've got to admit, being totally honest, I wouldn't, during the pandemic, it's shown some real pinch points in our society where people can be forgotten and certain causes can go by the wayside. And the cause that you're doing all this for is a fascinating one, because I wouldn't have thought of it, if I'm honest, unless you were doing this bike ride. And it really has got me thinking, and that's why I love being part of your journey on this. I love keeping tabs on it, and doing the tiny bit of support that we do, just because it's showing up a bit of our society that during this pandemic, where a lot of people are having a hard time, that could be a group of people that really do fall to the bottom and in some ways get neglected. And actually what you're doing so successfully is bringing awareness of that up and doing a really proactive thing yourself, but also showing a really proactive way that we can all help that part of our society. And it's an important part of our society, and it should be dignified and treated with dignity, and that's what you're doing. It's a good word for it, actually. It's very dignified what you're doing right now. Would you agree, Rob?
And Jacob, why in particular have Big Issue vendors and has the Big Issue Foundation always been quite high on your consciousness as far as your charitable side is concerned? Or did you suddenly see something one day that absolutely struck a chord and resonated with you?
Well, no, I'll be honest, I've been buying it off for about 18, and obviously always tried to buy it when I've encountered a vendor. But the last 3 years since the company I work for, Perfect Storm, we moved to Old Street, and outside the Pret there's a guy called Stevie who's the vendor, the local vendor, and he's literally just like a ray of sunshine. He's like he'll pick you up and make every day better. Like, he's always up for a chat, always wants to know how you are, always interested. And over like the last 3 years, he's become quite a good friend. And obviously, I saw him the day before lockdown and was just like talking to him about what was going to happen, and he was a bit in limbo. And then obviously we saw Lord Bird come out and said, like, for the safety of all their vendors, they were pulling them off the streets. And because these guys are all like micro entrepreneurs, like they only make money if they can sell the paper. So there's a big push for subscriptions, and I obviously did that. And I would honestly, if anyone has got the spare 30 quid or something, or whatever it is, to subscribe for the next 3 months and wants to do something good, I'd push everyone to go and subscribe to that magazine, because if it folds, the amount of people that will be affected by that. I think they've got over 2,000 vendors in the UK, and that is a lifeline for them.
Is there a real chance of that then? Is that, because I'm not fully across this, so is there a good chance that something like the Big Issue could fold throughout all of this?
Yeah, it could go under, wow. which would be absolutely devastating. Like, it's been going for 29. It started in 91, the year I was born, and it's been going ever since. So yeah, it would be an incredible, not just a shame for our culture, but an incredibly missed resource for people, to help themselves help some of the most vulnerable people in society help themselves. But yeah, I decided to kind of brush the exercise bike down that I've not used in years, was using it as a clothes horse, and kind of just jump on it and ride for Stevie, really. And I knew that, by the money going to the Big Issue Foundation, that, it'd help him and help other vendors, get through this crisis. And it was only then I actually found out it was 3,500 kilometers, which was a bit of a...
That's the silly part of this, isn't it? I mean, like, I get what you're saying. It's the kind of thing, you've got a good cause, right, and you've got a great name for it. But then suddenly the reality is it's 3,500 kilometers. It's a long way, my friend. And I really don't think I could do it. Funnily enough, I've started. I don't know if it's to do with you actually, Jacob, but I picked up a bike for the first time this week, in a long time, and I loved it. I went out cycling, and it made me kind of. And then I did it 2 days on the bounce. But then suddenly I've noticed the excuses have started creeping in. Like, it's raining outside, so suddenly the bike ride's been off a little bit. So I feel particularly inadequate deciding I'm not going to go out and cycle at the moment when you're doing that. But it is it's a long way that you're going, and today's the final stretch, I believe, if I've been keeping tabs properly. So it's really exciting, and I think, like all of these types of things, when you get to near the end of it, everyone's interest really kind of peaks. And I've been really lucky to have done a couple of bits for Comic Relief and Sport Relief, and I find that sometimes it can take to the last day, because people can often go, "Oh, he's doing a great." It's kind of to a certain extent in the background a little bit. He's doing well. He's doing his thing. I'll donate tomorrow. And I guess what we just really want to try and do today is really see you across the line in style. And it'd be great to do. It'd be great to raise as much money in real practical terms. Because I'm going to be honest here, lads, I haven't donated properly yet. So what do I need to do? Do I subscribe to the Big Issue, or do I send some money to a Just Giving? What's it I need to do, Rob?
Right, Jacob, you can back me up here. I'll just get the iPad. If you tap in Le Tour de Flat, normal spelling, L-E Tour de Flat.
Okay. Can I do this at the same time? Let's have a look.
And type in Jacob Hill-Gowing, Gowing. It will take you straight to the Just Giving page. And I'm just having a little look here. I think in the last few minutes, hey, well done. Jacob, I don't know whether you know some of these people. You've had an anonymous donation who says you plonker. It could be your twin brother, who knows. And then in the last 4 minutes since we've been on, and it's really good of Just Giving, Jamie Parkins and the team to let us come on and do this live. Sam Bortwood has just written over and said, "My hero, Jakey, inspirational, 100 quid plus 25 quid gift aid."
Wow.
Louise has written, "Keep going, mate, nearly there, 20 quid. And Dom Coombs, you're smashing it, Jake, almost there, saving so much on trains at the moment, it's a no-brainer." And then in capitals, he's written payday. So is he one of your work colleagues?
Well, Sam is one of my good friends that I've known since infant school, so like all my life, really. And he's a dead ringer for Ed Sheeran. So,
so he must have all the money then from the doppelganger appearances.
Yeah, exactly.
In nightclubs and stuff. Jacob, I feel horrendous that we're kind of you've done so much exercise and we're talking to you throughout this. So please say if you ever need a break, and me and Rob can just have a little chin wag maybe. There are so many questions, and we should say as well, like, obviously, away from just saying thank you to you, Jacob, as you keep going, but thank you to everyone that is donating towards this, because, as I said earlier to you, Rob, it is something from nothing, this, and those are the best causes I find that I get interested in and kind of want to get behind. I think it comes from being a Watford fan. I've always supported the underdog, and we're very much the underdogs in a lot of situations. Maybe not so much anymore. But that's kind of what this feels like. And as that person, was it Sam that you said? Rob?
Yeah, Sam Bortwood, my hero, Jakey, inspirational with a kiss.
Yeah, it is. It's inspirational. And as the other person said, it is, like me personally, I'm saving a bit of money on train tickets at the moment. And this does feel like a good little outlay, to something positive. And as I said, it's not something I've heard of anyone else, to be honest with you, anyone else really raising money for. And I think about it. I think about some of the things I miss from not walking to the BBC at the moment. And it is, you pass the same vendors every day, and occasionally I buy the Big Issue. But even just seeing them, there's always a hello, there's always a good morning, good afternoon. It's sort of, it's when I go into work, it's when I go out of work, and yes, a lot of us are inside at the moment. Like me personally, I'm doing the radio from home, but I do miss those kind of interactions a little bit in a weird kind of way. It's not something I even thought that I was missing. So Jacob, thanks so much for reminding me about these people that must be having a horrendous time with their job. Many of whom were in tricky situations as it was. But these people that do need that boost, it really saddens me, the idea that the big issue might be affected in that way. It's just something that's always been there for me. I've taken it for granted to a certain extent. It's just always been there.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it started in 1991. So it's a couple of years before I started university. It feels like it's been around forever. And I had a question for you, Jacob. Have you heard about how Stevie's getting on since lockdown began? Have you got any update on his whereabouts, whether he's safe, whether he's warm? Has he got a bed?
No, I know he lives in a flat in Highbury somewhere, or Islington. And I know he's got family. I'm just hoping that. I mean, if he's watching this, just want to say, hang in there, mate. We're all in your corner, and we'll see you soon, hopefully. When we can get back to work. And I look forward to you telling me that I'm late every morning and holding me to account for it.
Does he?
Everyone at work is watching this now probably get reprimanded on Monday because, yeah, we miss you, mate. So, yeah, look after yourself, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, and if you are watching this, and we're on right through until the very end of Jacob's final kilometre, and we haven't asked him yet whether he's got himself a bottle of lockdown champagne ready to spray at the cameras. But if you do know Stevie and you're watching this, send us a tweet. Let us know. Jacob's checking his Twitter, well, every 2 minutes. He's on @LatourDeFlat. I'm on @RobWalkerTV. We've got a whole host of people coming on this afternoon to join the likes of Chris and myself to pay tribute to Jacob and to chew the fat and to just keep Jacob company over the last 3 and a bit hours. We've got a brilliant producer doing all this for free as well. Scamp, we call him. Scamp, how many kilometres left now, please? Because I can't see it. 97 kilometres to go. Come on, big boy, you've got this. I don't know whether Scamp has Chris gone. Chris Stark?
No, sorry guys, I'm here. I'm just donating. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Just on the Just Giving.
I had a question for you, Chris. It doesn't matter that we can't see you. We can certainly hear you perfectly well. One of the things that struck me, and you might be in a position to answer this, doing the show with Scott Mills and being on 5 Live as well. I'm older than you. I'm of a certain vintage where I can take it or leave it when it comes to social media. I don't mind it, but I think in some regards it can be quite a negative, poisonous medium, especially for teenage boys and girls. However, my opinion on social media has softened and changed a bit during lockdown, because whereas I think my previous attitude, as I've alluded to, was that I think it's a resting place of a lot of negativity, I think there's been a lot of positivity on social media since lockdown began, and that has surprised me. I wonder what your reflections are, because let's face it, if it wasn't for social media, you and I aren't talking to each other, and Jacob's cycling with a virtual audience of nil. So I think the parameters around social media have changed, and I've definitely changed my opinion of it as a result.
I think it's a very fair point. I think the thing is with social media, it really can be what we all want it to be. And sadly, it does fester. And different types of social media as well are different. I find people might be different on Twitter to how they are on Instagram. It's funny how it can change between it. But I think there is a lot of negativity, right? And then really easiest way someone put it to me with social media, because I at times have felt a little bit bogged down by it, and occasionally you can get the odd message here or there, and it's just, for all everyone says it's sort of water up a duck's back, it's not the reality of it. You still see these messages, you've still got to kind of decide how you want to act. Sometimes you feel by not acting that you're almost letting people get away with it. But I've learned that the mute button on social media is a very powerful thing. However, I'd qualify that by also saying it's such a fantastic outlet for people to be positive and to get a word about positive things that they are doing out there. There's not really anything else like that. So the fact that this is really doing massive on social media and lots of people are following it is because there is a demand there. People want to see positivity. People want to see good. But the way someone put it to me at Radio 1, and I think this was a really good way, it was actually Greg James who told me this. And he said that really all we can all do is just look after our own patch throughout this whole kind of pandemic, in that it's hard when we feel like we can't control all of social media. We can't control all of Twitter. We can't stop the loudmouths. We can't stop trolls. We can't change behaviors as a whole. But what we can all do is decide how we want to be on social media, and ultimately that can produce a bigger picture, which is nice and it's positive. People like Jacob doing this, people donating right now. And I think we should read out a few more names of donations. I think the more we can spread this positive message through social media, this is really what social media should be about. So I completely understand your misgivings with it, Rob, and I completely understand that view. But I think that can also be a bit simplistic, and I think it can be, if you, without causing offence,
none taken.
The easy way to just count it out. Whereas actually, we can all do our bit and look after our own little patch. And I do truly believe that there are more good people out there than there are. I could use whatever number of different.
I could tell you were reaching for a word there, and then your broadcasting experience just pulled you back down from the edge.
Yeah, but I think what I'm trying to get at is I do agree with you, Rob, but it's up to us to try and make it as positive as we can, and that does force change. What Jacob's doing today isn't just raising money; he's raising awareness. I can say that personally. It's not an issue that I've thought about without wanting to make a pun of it. It's a big issue, and it's brilliant that we're all here right now, donating, talking. I don't know about you, Jacob. I know you must be getting tired, so I don't want to keep you talking too much, but you must be so proud of the conversations that are coming from this, as well as the money. Even if people can't afford the money side of things, it's amazing that people can even just put a tweet up saying, watch this guy doing the Tour de Flat. That's as valuable in many ways as money.
Yeah, I mean, it's just about raising awareness at the end of it. If you can't afford to donate, a retweet or something like that, it's anything that can help raise awareness of the issue, really. Because, we're talking about some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And, if it helps them know that we're in their corner and we're thinking about them, as well as helping raise awareness of the charity cause, then it can only be a good thing, really.
By the way, Jacob, just to read out a few more, some of these you'll definitely know, some you won't, I guess. Gary Gibson, do you know him? Jacob is a ledge, Ledge. I love that.
I'm hearing that word a lot at the moment,
yeah.
Jacob.
Do you know that guy, Jacob?
Gary Gibson?
Gary Gibson.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Should be a film star. What a name that is.
What sort of film star? Let's brush over that.
Well,
I love the alliteration names. Dirk Diggler springs to mind. Let's move on. Mum and Jeff, 100 quid. Chris has just whacked 50 quid in the kitty, which is brilliant. And Soph. Keep going, Jake. So proud of you. Who's Soph?
It's a girl I work with at Perfect Storm.
Oh, all of your colleagues must have been in touch. I presume you're having regular meetings and so on. I know you tend to work in the mornings and do your cycling in the afternoon. What's been the general response since lockdown began and you started your quest on March the 22nd?
It's been amazing, really. I'm going to have to close the window in a minute. It's raining. Yeah, it's been amazing. Like the support from people at work. You know, they've all the guys at Perfect Storm have donated a load of cash, which is amazing. But you know, supporting me along the way, which is mad. I mean, you know, without that, I don't think I would have been able to do it just because of the, you know, you're talking about 41 days without a rest. It's a bit stupid, really. But you know, my whole thing going into it was, you know, the people that are trying to raise money and work to help the people that need it aren't taking a day off, so neither am I. So,
Jacob, sorry, just to interrupt again. I don't know whether you're keeping on top of these. Every time I refresh the page, you're almost there, mate. You're 89%. Sebastian Hill, you are a tour de force. Love you, big brother. 200 quid. Right. Tom Leftley, by the way, it's not breaking news. He's given up. He's just gone to close the window because it's lashing with rain. There he goes. He's back on the bike. Don't think he'd given up. There are people about to donate, and suddenly they've gone, hang on a minute. He's given up with 90K to go. LJ's put 50 quid in the kitty. Go on, wow. Jakey. Tom Leftley, congratulations, mate. You must have legs like Stuart Pearce by now.
People have been so generous. It's lovely to see. It's lovely to see how people are really embracing this final stage. I'm not trying to bring the Tour de France back into it in such a kind of overt way, but yeah, it's the final stage, and I think it would just be great to see you across in style, and that's what we're all here for today. It's you've done an amazing thing. It's you're continuing to do an amazing thing, but also just a massive thank you to everyone that's donating at the moment, and I mean, I'm amazed how much that total has gone up in the last 15 minutes. It's insane.
Yeah, well, I made a note before we started, guys. We were on you, Jacob, we're on 8,226, and you're just about to tickle your way across the 9 grand mark. And wow. I know, Chris, I don't know whether, I know you're a massive sports fan. The other time during lockdown that I specifically got involved in a live broadcast was the guy called James Campbell, who did the 6-meter back garden marathon. He's coming on to join us shortly, actually. And, you know, I tell you what happened with his, Jacob. It started off fairly kind of organically, if we want to use a nice term. And the closer he got to the end of the marathon, the quicker the money was coming in. So I take this, touch wood, as a really good sign that we've already gone up by almost 700 quid in the first half an hour, because there'll be many people watch for a little bit, then they go off for a cup of tea, or they've got to go and do a Zoom call. They'll come back a bit later. This thing, hopefully, for your sake and the sake of the Big Issue Foundation, will gather momentum naturally over the final hour and a bit. And I'm really hoping that you are going to be flabbergasted as and when, at whatever time it is, 5:45, 6:15, whatever time you finish. I think you'll be really pleased at how far in excess of 10 grand you've got, especially judging, as Chris has said, by this first 36 minutes. I think you're going to break it by a long way.
Well, Jacob, I think that would be amazing. But I think it's really important to also underline in all this that if you are able to give a donation, you know, massive thank you and congratulations for choosing this particular cause to support, and Jacob. But also, please spread the word about it as well. You know, if you have donated, and then you can just put something on Facebook and get mates involved. I think if everyone that's watching this or listening to this right now can get their patch, as we described it earlier, their little circle of mates, and just get word about this out there, I think it could be something really phenomenal that we do today. And also, it's a huge statement. It's a huge statement for how we all need to look after everyone in our society, and especially those that maybe haven't got the loudest voice. And I think that's what has really struck me. There's been magic behind this. Has been it's raising money for a cause that I think would be I think they'd find it very hard to get the word out there themselves. And we can all do that. We can all be part of that machine that helps this grow. And keep driving those donations, because if between us we can get over 10 grand, for this charity. That is just something from nothing, and it will be really special. And actually, it will totally justify the amount of beers that I'll have tonight, probably celebrating. I don't know about you, Jacob, but you might be too tired for that. I'm assuming that you'll have at least one or two.
Yeah, I mean, the guys at work have sent around a bottle of champagne, which I'm going to proceed to bathe in. So, to probably get on the podium and spray it all over my own face. But, yeah, I mean, I haven't had a drink in 43 days. So that's probably going to hit me like a ton of bricks.
Wow, you haven't had a drink?
No, not since I started.
Wow. Well, I think Chris, I think he's hanging around for a little bit, and hopefully we'll get some more nuggets from him as the afternoon goes on. And the eagle-eyed among you will have spotted a fairly famous bald pate and beard joining us in the top right-hand corner. A man who could barely speak the last time I crossed paths with him virtually. A very good afternoon to Scottish Commonwealth javelin thrower, and perhaps ironically, more famously known as the 6-meter back garden marathon man, all the way from down the road in Cheltenham. Good afternoon, James Campbell. How are you, sir?
Afternoon, gents. I'm very well, thank you. How you doing?
Very good. Well, listen, the reason I asked you to come on, James, is because you did, 6,200 circuits of your garden. You know the mental difficulties, albeit yours was in a day, and Jacob's doing his on 41 days. But I think the principle and the drain on your mental stamina, there are some real parallels to be drawn. So how much admiration have you got for Jacob, and what are the insights that you can give us about what Jacob will be feeling whilst we give him a couple of minutes to take on board his gels and just concentrate on racking up the Ks?
Yeah, it's unbelievable effort, that is. I remember Jamie just mentioned it to me in the day leading up to mine. Obviously, I had less than 48 hours notice when I decided to do mine. So he showed me Jacob's just giving page and what he was doing. I was thinking that's going to take a really, really long time. I can't believe, it's been a full month since I did mine today, and yeah, getting to your last 100K, like the feeling you'll have at the end of it, mate, will be unbelievable. Like probably incomparable to a lot of things you had in your life. I say mine was only a day; it was only 5 hours. So absolute hats off and so much respect for what you're doing. And you'll smash through that 10K barrier, I reckon, in the next. Right, 9,100 I'm looking at now on my screen. It might be a little bit behind, but it's flying up. So that's almost $1,000 in the last half an hour. So it'll keep trickling on, and just keep pushing through. A little sprint finish as well, hopefully.
Yeah, I reckon he will have. Sorry for turning away from the camera. My iPad's charging. We've got Daisy putting 20 quid in the kitty. Good effort, lad. The guys at Bike behaving badly. Can't even ride a bike. So pleased for you. 30 quid. A tenner anonymous. Couple of pints. Sean and Zoe, come on you irons. 100 quid from them. And James and Tash, here's a little bit of money to get you to £9,000. They donated £34. And as James has just said, you've already added nearly £1,000 in the first 42 minutes. You're at 9,110 at 91% of your total. James, just going back to you for a minute. How many times in your 6-meter back garden marathon, which I'll never forget to the day I die, by the way, commentating on that, it was utterly bizarre and wonderful at the same time. How many mental wobbles did you have during that, or were there none? Did you just get into a tunnel vision and grind it out, as Jacob's done with his 3,500K?
It was weird because I think I might be different for Jacob today. If he's been doing a lot of it on his own, that's one of the most impressive things about it for me. If he's been at home on his own for the last 40 odd days and doing this every day on his own, obviously posting on social media or whatever, people are watching. But the fact that I had the live stream and you guys talking, and that was the bit that kind of enabled me to get into a zone and just get on with it. So I'm not a runner. I hate running, and the thought of doing that in that confined space for me was just what is the most ridiculous idea I can think of at the time, and stitch myself up with, and then just do it. But yeah, the fact that, I mean, mentally, it was more the physical pain came after sort of 80% of the way through. But I mean, the kind of the reward mentally, and like you realise kind of what you're capable of. That was kind of a massive boost to me, and like I say for Jacob as well. Spending that amount of time on your own is difficult. I'd only been at home for a week on my own, and I was starting to lose the plot. So that's kind of where my idea came from spontaneously. So yeah, I think it's just the fact that you've done 40 days on your own. Like, hats off, that is absolutely.
James, I've got to ask something. Is it only sort of bold people that kind of take up these crazy challenges that you all do? Is there some sort of memo that goes around, or is a certain look going on? I'm noticing.
What we lose in hair, we lose in sanity as well, I think, isn't it? I think we're both. Yeah, not.
I think you're class, James. I saw loads about your challenge. I thought it was amazing, and congratulations. And Jacob, I just got to say, because I've got to do my click and collect, adulting. I just thought, just before I go away for a bit, and then I'll come back and have a beer when you cross the line. Just massive well done, mate, and thank you for what you're doing as well, because as important as it is to say kind of thank you as well to everyone that's donating and everyone that continues to support this and get the word out there, the main thanks has to go to you, Jacob, for shining a light on this amazing cause, for creating something from nothing here and giving us all something to rally behind on this Friday. And actually it stops this Friday just being another Friday. There's a real reason to make this Friday count, and it's thanks to you, Jacob. So it's been amazing following this journey. I think we're going to speak to you on the radio tomorrow morning as well. But just keep going, mate. We'll have a couple of beers in a bit, and it's been a pleasure to just be part of this for the last half hour. And thank you everyone donating as well. It's you're doing your bit today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to you as well, Chris, for getting the campaign going, and I know you'll be back to join us a little bit later. Well, Jacob, you've got a guard of honour. You've got James here. We've got great characters coming in throughout the afternoon. I've just done a little refresh. I think at the moment we're still on. What are we on? Yeah, we're still on 9,110. James and Tash, the last donators, with 34 quid. So we are going to get there. I had a question for you, James, just while Jacob catches up on a few social media messages. So he's keeping the drum beating right to the very end. I've always loved running marathons and commentating on them. And I've always had, from a commentary box point of view, huge admiration for men and women who make it to compete for their country at major championships. Were there any parallels at all between competing in Hampden in 2014 for Scotland in a home Commonwealth Games in the javelin? And I know your career was cut short with injury, but that must have been an amazing moment. Were there any parallels, or was there any strength mentally that you took into your 6-meter back garden marathon from all your years of competing at the highest level, or were the two completely separate?
It's weird because I think I've trying to replicate that feeling. It's not something you can do very often. In terms of looking for a direction since I finished athletics, I've not found many things that are comparable. So it's just been that looking for that feeling of accomplishment and actually being impressed with myself. I've never been that bothered about kind of impressing other people or anything. It's just doing something that I'm proud of. And I think doing that marathon, because it was just such an unusual thing for me to do. Anyone who knows me, and I don't know how keen a cyclist Jacob was before this. I'm guessing not the most keen if he just dusted it off and jumped on. So it's that. I like the feeling and like the emotion at the end of it. I'm warning you now, Jacob. When you finish, get the Kleenex ready, because it's going to be. It's going to hit you like a train, especially the amount of time that you've been going for. So, I think the feeling of finishing and like the support of everyone and having actually kind of accomplish something. But I didn't ever feel like accomplished back then when I did athletics due to injuries or whatever. So that feeling of accomplishment will be something that you'll never forget, and that's very hard to compare to anything else.
Did you, I mean, a question for both of you, really. First of all, James, because his great challenge has finished and yours is imminently to come to a close. Did you feel were you close to tears at the end of yours, James? Because I got the impression you were emotional, but I didn't think that you were right on the verge of tears. And then when you've answered that, do you think you might get a little bit emotional, Jacob, when you finish? If James, you give your answer first, and then we'll hear Jacob's take.
Yeah, for me, it was you, Rob, and everyone who gave up their time that day to do the live stream, and how it built so much momentum. That was the bit that kind of meant so much to me with it. Just incredibly grateful for everyone who got behind it. And it's the same, like I say, doing the same today. You get people coming in and chatting, and if anything, just to distract Jacob more than anything as well. The thing for me, because it was quite hard for me to hear what was going on the stream at the other end of the garden. So I could hear bits and bobs that were going on. But it was just trying to stay as distracted as possible. I think, obviously, the fatigue in Jacob's legs must be pretty extreme. But yeah, having this chat going on the whole time and being able to listen to it and interact is definitely will be a bonus for you. But yeah, I was once people asked me kind of what it meant, and yeah, it was emotional. I didn't expect it to be. It was just, one day in my life or whatever. But it was it is, and knowing that it's going to a good cause, and that was the bit that really got me.
And Jacob, from your side, do you this has been a really good journey for you in terms of your, as you've indicated to me before we came on air, this has been really good for your mental health, being in a one-bed flat on your own and working from home and trying to keep yourself on a positive curve and have an outlet for maybe the physical frustrations. Can you anticipate this getting a bit emotional as you get towards the end, or are you a bit more of a belt and braces man? Will you just give yourself a pat on the back and have a well-earned beer?
Yeah, I can see it getting a bit emotional. I was actually very anxious about it ending, and not wanting it to end because of the kind of, it's had such a positive effect on my mental health in terms of just maintaining a routine. I know I got to get up in the morning, go to work, finish work at 6, get on the bike at 6:30 and cycle, for a few hours. So yeah, I can see it being very emotional. Like, if we break that target, I've already broken one target. If we break this next one and then put it up, I think because it's going to a cause that, I've got a good friend that it's going to affect. I can see it being very emotional. But yeah, not yet there yet. I think I've still got about 75 kilometres to go. So definitely, as we're getting to the end, I can definitely see it becoming a bit emotional.
Well, we'll try and keep you motivated and keep those messages coming in. I do apologise for turning away from the screen. I'm just double checking. Oh, we're up to 9,410. Let me just read out a few of these, if I may. This has just pumped up recently. We had Sean and Zoe, James and Tash. I wonder whether that's Andrew Cotter. It could be. It might not be. Or it's Andrew Cott. Might be Andrew Cotter, the brilliant rugby commentator who's gone viral with his videos of his dogs. Not long now, he says, if it is him or if it's Andrew Cott, a different Andrew Cott, then great. The Honey Monster has written supreme effort. And David Winston, phenomenal effort. Keep those huge legs pumping, big boy. And we're already, as I mentioned, we're at 94% of the 10 grand total. And we're up now to 341 supporters. When you do get to 10 grand, don't give us a figure now. Have you got an idea of how far you want to change the benchmark? Or are you going to do what Captain Tom did and leave it at a certain amount and just see where the public want to take it? What's your approach? Because we are going to get to 10K, big boy.
I've always thought, like setting a target and trying to hit it is probably the best thing to do. As I say, started with 5, got to 5 and thought, why not? Let's up it to 10. So yeah, I think, if we up it again, I'll probably up it once more, and if it goes over that, I think we'll just let it run. But I mean, it's already a phenomenal amount of money that I would have never imagined raising this amount of money. And I think James can probably say the same thing. I saw, how wild that went. You can't comprehend, the amount of money that's being raised through things like this. It's mad, and to see like what was it, 300 and how many people have backed it?
341 at my last check.
I mean, that's probably 10 times the amount of people I know. So, the generosity of the general public is absolutely phenomenal. You've got people that are donating that don't know me personally, and they're just donating because it's a good cause. So, yeah, it's great. That's the mad thing, I think, really, and I think that's part of. You were talking earlier about the good and bads of social media, and I think that is definitely the best of the best of what social media can do. If it can help to galvanise people behind a cause and raise loads of money for charities that are they need us more than ever now, then that's amazing.
Yeah, just to read out a couple. Your brother's put 200 quid in. I love this. He says, from 35 pints to 3,500 kilometres. So that alludes to your probably less than monastic lifestyle pre this challenge. Chris Edwards, he's whacked a tenner in. Good on you, Chris. That's a couple of pints. Well, probably a pint and a half in London, but anyway. Come on, Jake. You can thank Alexis for the recommendation. And Scott has written, go on, Jacob. So you're not far off, only needing 500 quid to get across the 10 grand line. So it's superb. And James, I think I can answer this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Have you got any desire to do a marathon outdoors? Because I've said to Jacob that somehow he's suddenly, now that he's done 3,500 K indoors, someone's got to get him a road bike outdoors. Are we going to see you doing the London Marathon next year, or is that it for you for 26.2?
I've been sat here for the last month thinking I wish I had a bike, because I think I'd enjoy that more. I think you must have a comfortable seat as well, because I've tried to do little bits. No, oh mate, I dread to think of the state of your
on the agony, mate.
Your ass cheek.
Who's coming on later? He introduced the chamois cream, and I'll tell you what, that has been a lifesaver. I mean, I wasn't wearing cycling shorts until I was on Chris and Scott's show, and they dialed Geraint Thomas in, and I asked him about it. I was like, "How can you stop your bum from hurting?" And he said, "Get a good pair of shorts." I think I was about 1,000 kilometres in when I spoke to him.
Oh mate.
Yeah, I only got a pair of shorts after that.
That sounds horrendous, because I've tried to do little bits on a bike, like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it was sore after that. So yeah, I dread to think. But I don't know if I've tried running in the last month, and I get to about, everyone's doing this 5K, aren't they? And it's been a great cause with that as well. Everyone does it and then donates. I get to about 3K, and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't need a live stream to do it. I need something extra, or whether I just forget the distance and just go and just see how far I can go. I don't know. Mentally, I need to work that out, because there's obviously something in it for me with running, but finding out what it is, I haven't quite done that yet.
Well, you've earned your right to a proper rest. I mean, the number of turns and twists you had in that marathon, it would have absolutely annihilated your legs. I think the one good thing you could say, if you did run a traditional marathon outdoors, I don't think your legs would be anywhere near as wrecked. Not because you've covered the distance before, but simply because the way you did it was about as hard a way to run a marathon than I can remember from anybody, because it was effectively like the longest leap test in history. You lost momentum other than when you did a circle of 8. You were losing all momentum every 7 or 8 seconds. So you'll never run a harder marathon than that, I don't think. But anyway, we'll see whether you get an invite, a celebrity invite to the London Marathon. It is rescheduled for October the 4th, by the way. So Eliud Kipchoge, Kenenisa Bekele, and James Campbell. I quite like the sound of that. Anyway, let's see what happens when touch wood when we get out of lockdown. And Jacob, do you think you might do a few miles on the roads when we all do get back to some semblance of normality? Can you see yourself getting an outdoor bike?
I mean, I've got one. I just haven't used it in about 7 years. So, I've got this old. It's actually my granddad's from 1980. This old road frame that I've got. It just needs a bit of love and attention, really, because it's just been sitting in my hallway for 7 years. I've not been using that one as a clothes haul, so it's more of an installation. Because it's, but yeah, I think I'll definitely get out on the road and, who knows, go after the likes of Geraint and give them a run for their money. Who knows?
Well, that's funny. Going back to the 1980s, that so it was. Is that what we all used to call a racer? I know we don't. The term isn't used now, but is that what we used? The old school racer.
Yeah, it's got like the gears on the frame. Yeah, it's like an old Raleigh winner or something like that.
That is brilliant. It's probably an antique by now.
Yeah, I think it is. Just why I need to give it a bit of love and attention. But yeah, hopefully get out on that in the future and not be stuck in on this. But 70 kilometres to go now, so. Pushing on.
Yeah, I'm just double checking. All 9,620. We've had, of course, some of these are anonymous. Ian Cleverly, who I know is going to be, he's given you the shorts and the chamois cream. He's put some money in the kitty. You're so close now. 346 supporters. Whilst you concentrate on the ride, and we might actually get you a campaign for a Farmer Giles advertising campaign after this. You never know. James, we have got loads of time here just to kind of chew the fat whilst we get Jacob across the line. As you have been an elite sportsman, how long do you think? And I'm not specifically talking athletics; could be talking football, cricket, cycling, whatever. How long do you think it will take elite sportsmen and women to get back up to their peak ability? Because even if they've been able to keep physically fit, even if they've lived in an environment where they could get outdoors and go for cycle rides or runs, do you think there'll be an element of rustiness amongst elite sportsmen and women? And how long will it take for them to shake that off? How soon will it be before we see the world's best in whatever performing once again at the very height of their powers?
Yeah, I'm thinking with football, especially, there's talk of it being back maybe in a month, but it still doesn't seem very certain at all. They're almost going to need like a condensed version of pre-season again, and with it being Olympic year as well, like I can't imagine what that is like for athletes who've had that all winter, get right to the start of the season, of the outdoor season, and then it's just knocked on their head like that. Mentally, that's going to be very, very difficult to deal with. So I'm hoping they can get some sort of competition season in at the end. But it's hard to know, just to keep ticking over with that uncertainty. It's got to be done, but it's a very, like I say, it's a unique situation, and I don't think. Well, it's incredibly difficult. I know it was a very difficult thing for people think it's only sport, and it's it is a good lifestyle and whatever, but you know, it's careers can be made in a very, very short time frame. And I know if I'd had the perfect winter training, and then I've gone into the competitive season in athletics or whatever, and then it was just knocked on the head, that's just like, it's not even worth thinking about for me, because I know mine started to go very well for a short period of time, and then I got injured. So it's the same sort of thing. If it's just cut, it's difficult. So well, with things like football, at least it'll be a fairly level playing field, and yeah, obviously they'll have lucky to have gyms at home and whatever, some of them, so they'll have kept ticking over to an extent, but there will be a level of rustiness, I imagine.
Well, one sport in which they might be feeling a little bit rusty is rugby. You know, a sport that requires a huge amount of skill as well as the physical prowess in the gym. And one of the finest rugby commentators, who has gone seriously viral over the last couple of months, is Nick Heath. And Nick, it is brilliant to have you on the programme alongside James and cheering on Jacob as he edges towards 10 grand. He's getting ever closer. Good afternoon, and what an amazing period it's been for you during lockdown. You are one of the men of the moment.
Good afternoon, Rob. Yes, good afternoon, James, and to Jacob. Great to be with you all. And yeah, it's in a period of curious lockdown, quarantine, a life-changing moment for many people. Turns out that some people have to come out winning, and so far, one of those people seems to be me. Putting out some stupid videos has captured the imagination of a lot of people. And while indeed, as you say, while we've got no actual sport to commentate on, although albeit the Tour de Flat is doing pretty well, the mundane activities of life in southwest London and going around tooting has provided me with enough material to keep people entertained for a little while. So yeah, it's been a fun few weeks, shall we say. I'm also very jealous of the way that you store all of your accreditations gone by. I need to look into doing something like that, Rob. Excellent.
Well, I definitely want to come back to you with a couple of questions. That was my wife. We lived in London for many years and didn't have a huge amount of space. And then we now live out in the sticks and had the garage converted into my office. And my wife kept saying, why don't you throw these lanyards out? They're absolutely useless. I said, no, at some point, maybe we might one day have enough space to put them out. And I went in the loft when the office was done. And I said, right, you're the artistic one. We're not chucking them out. What do you want to do with them? So, yeah, I've got the athletics ones and Olympic ones and so on. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, for people who haven't, discovered you online, it's the timing and the moments of comedy, as well as the ability to translate actions into words simultaneously. Were you gobsmacked by the speed with which you did go viral, or have you always kind of thought, do you know what, it would be great one day if there was just a weird situation where I could just commentate on anything?
I think it probably came from the fact that I was doing the sort of parody stuff, the really sort of back of the throat Barry Davis, David Coleman sort of the stuff for a while to entertain mates. When you're brought up on a proper kind of British diet of multi-sport and Wimbledon and athletics and football and all that sort of thing, I think if you're as into it all and the presentation of it, the theme tunes and everything as I was growing up, you just get all of this by osmosis, really. So I used to do that kind of voice to entertain my mates, and then we got to a point, obviously a few weeks ago, where there was no sport to commentate on. So I started redoing the silly voice and just bringing out the sort of sporting cliches and silly lines that this character in my head enjoys gravitating towards. And I was absolutely blown away by the reaction to it. Greg James played it on the BBC Radio Breakfast Show, and then Sarah Cox played it on the Drive Time Show on Radio 2. By the Saturday, I got Radio 5 down. I was just waiting for Radios 3 and 4 to make the set, and then eventually Broadcasting House with Paddy O'Connell got me Radio 4. I think I need to learn the bassoon before Radio 3 will have me on. It's been absolutely ridiculous. Interviews with CNN, Australia and New Zealand TV this morning with Phil and Holly. Have I Got News for You have played the clips out. It's been a bonkers few weeks, and a very welcome distraction from not having any real sport to actually commentate on, of course, because I know it's been pretty difficult for an awful lot of people out there. So I think various broadcasters are finding new ways to create content, whether it's Zoom interviews, whether it's podcasts. I think if you're a broadcaster and you haven't got your own podcast, then frankly, what are you doing? So yeah, it's been a curious time, but no, I've been very grateful for everybody who's loved it, indulged me in the madness of it, and allowed it to continue as long as it has.
Yeah, well, and long may it continue whilst we are under lockdown. And I guess,
Bless you.
yeah, as you and I are fortunate to make our living as broadcasters, it's been really refreshing to cover unique challenges like James, who's still on the line. I was fortunate enough to commentate on his 6-meter back garden marathon. And we've got Jacob in the foreground here, edging ever closer to £10,000. It's individual moments of inspiration that have really made people smile. And I guess on a wider sort of social level, it's reminded us, even though everybody rushes around and we can lose our rag in traffic jams and so on, there's a hell of a lot of good people in Britain, and they are rising to the occasion. And there's one dressed in yellow with his helmet for no reason whatsoever in his front room. These are the people, James and Jacob, who've reminded us that there's some really cool people in our country.
Yeah, absolutely, and it shows what spirit is brought about by such individuals down the country when the chips are down. I think it's indicative of the money that was raised for Captain Tom. I mean, he raised more from one man doing a gesture than a whole country on a charity night a couple of weeks after when we had the big night in, which was a great initiative in its own. But I think it might be the case. Someone will correct me, I'm sure, but I think one of the biggest children in needs or comic relief totals ever was while we were in the middle of one of our worst recessions. So there's something about the fact that while the chips are down, people are more sympathetic. They've got more empathy with those that are going through a tough time because they maybe don't feel so hot on life themselves, and so people will give very generously, and it's a beautiful quality, and likewise, as you say, all those people that feel, well, hold on a minute, I've got something I can possibly do here, or something I'm happy to take on as a challenge, and it'll be a challenge for me, but it'll maybe drag a few people with me, and their interest in it will distract them from any anxieties perhaps they've got about the current climate. Yeah, hats off to everybody that's done any form of small to big challenge, really, and even all the people that have run their own little 5Ks while that was doing the rounds across Instagram and everything else, dobbing in your mates to go and do a 5K, people who are having to do a bit of running for the very first time in their lives, but it all helps.
And yeah, and have you been surprised at the range of activities we've seen? I mean, there's been some brilliant things that you could have added your commentary to. I mean, the 6-meter back garden marathon, as you say, we've had extreme hedge cutting. Your voice on that would have been sensational. It is amazing how imaginative people have been under this physical environment restriction.
There was actually my neighbour over the road, just out in front of me here in Tooting. There was a chap from, what is he? He's number 202, was chopping one side of his hedge, and then the chap from 204 was coming out chopping the other side of the same hedge. But the chap in 204 had much smaller tools. My other half was like, you've got to commentate on this, but I've sort of been slightly wary of exactly exposing the precise location of our house by filming things out of our window. So I left that one, but it was brilliant. I was very tempted to do it. Yeah, I mean, the inventiveness of what people are doing has been fantastic. Various people, as I say, taking on these challenges, and it just goes to show that there is nothing too absurd, nothing too silly that people won't get behind. People understand that it's taking time. People are ultimately sat around working out what they can do to entertain themselves or others, and such of these things being dreamt up. I mean, one thing that I found quite interesting in the reaction to, I don't know what you might think about this in a sporting context, but a lot of people that have been following me have sort of changed the demographic of my social media following. I would have had a lot of guys following me for my work in rugby union. The live commentary stuff has gone global. My following in the USA has gone up massively, but it also, in terms of its demographic, has brought a lot more women on board, who are commenting on my commentary, saying, "I'm not really into sport that much, but if this is what it's going to look like, then count me in." And I wonder whether the sort of light touch and the humour that I've brought to them, albeit there's no sport going on in the clip, it's just me pretending there is, gives a sort of certain question over whether a lot of sports presentation is being maybe done a bit too seriously. Sure, we've got people who give their lives to it, and there's a lot of money involved in a lot of sports, but I wonder if certainly it's making me think, in my experience over the last 6 weeks, as to whether we need to think about sport as a bit more entertainment, and that some of these garden challenges and these living room challenges people are doing are capable of capturing the imagination of people and being spurred on with a bit of silly commentary over the top, or with commentators joining a man cycling in his room. I mean, these are the sorts of environments that are engaging people, and maybe while we've got massive football and rugby games going on behind paywalls that are only capable of attracting tens or maybe 100,000 people at most, we should think of these more as entertainment. We should put more fun into them, and perhaps we'd attract an awful lot more people to them.
Yeah, and one classic example of that, I think, one of the sports, or one of the kind of entities that I'm very privileged and fortunate enough to be part of, is the Paralympics and the Winter Paralympics. I've worked on every single one for quite a few years now, going back to Athens when it was really, really niche. I think one of the reasons the Paralympics has such a huge following is precisely what you've alluded to, that with the Paralympic sport, although elements of it are truly world class, it's the stories behind the reason why those people are competing as much as the achievements themselves. It's about the human interest side. There are some incredibly uplifting stories and reasons why people end up competing as Paralympians, especially if they have started life competing as an able-bodied man or woman. And I think the demographic of people who follow the Paralympics for that exact reason is very, very wide and inclusive. I know that's a kind of buzzword these days, but you get all sorts of people coming up to you talking about the Paralympics, people who, as you say, wouldn't necessarily sit avidly through Quins against Saracens or sit watching me commentate on the Paris Marathon. Stories about people, normal people with great motivation and determination, are very absorbing. And James did that brilliantly with his 6 meter back garden, and Jacob's doing it here today. It's the people behind the stories, isn't it? And that's not rocket science.
Oh, absolutely. People want to know what someone's giving to something, what their story's been, and as you say, things like the Paralympics are a very good example of that. But I think a lot of the time, perhaps there's a bit of a disconnect to people at the very top of elite sport. They're living slightly different lives. They're maybe, completely devoted to their sport, which takes a lot of devotion. I'm not saying that they're not worthy of everything that comes to them for the work they do, but perhaps it gets to a point where there's a little bit of disconnect from Bob and Sue, who are going down to do the big shop in Tesco on a Friday, and actually they're more likely to run into the bloke that's cycling in his living room or doing a 6 meter challenge, or is having to go down to the local leisure centre and put in the hard yards themselves. I'm an international touch rugby player. It's the sort of game that is completely unfunded, and so we're all out playing and doing our own training, and it's a crazy little sport, but we love it and we play it to the highest possible level that we can. But you do still get a feeling that you're involved in some form of sport to the highest level you can, and you're making those commitments, and knowing that everyday people are doing those things through various disciplines is what's great. And that sense, I think, of being able to identify with them is what gives people perhaps a higher level of interest.
Well, beautifully put. And there are certainly people feeling as though they can relate to what you're doing here, Jacob. 9,885 quid. You are 115 quid away. Steph's put 20 quid in. Adam has just written yes. Liam Sayers, top effort. Ellie Kinney, go Jake, an incredible achievement. You should be mega proud of yourself. Scott Core, come on Jake, cracking effort. Scott and Emily, they put in 60 quid. So Chris, on the earpiece, if I'm a little bit behind on the updates on the Just Giving, let me know, please. The split second we go over 10 grand, because it could come any minute now.
It could really happen at any stage now. Someone's going to put their hand in their pocket and potentially tip us over. It's a very exciting moment to be joining you here live as Jacob sets to set a real target and move us into 5 figures. 5 figures more than I've ever been paid for anything in my life, but it would be wonderful to get there via Just Giving and for the big issue. Lovely.
You're listening to Nick Heath. You're watching Jacob Hill-Gowing, and in the right-hand corner, you're watching and listening to James Campbell, the 6 meter back garden marathon runner who once competed for Scotland, throwing the javelin in the Commonwealth Games in 2014. And my name's Rob Walker, and we're all here just sharing rather selfishly and greedily, sharing this totally selfless journey that Jacob has embarked on March the 22nd. He thought, by the way, if you are just joining us and tuning in, he thought he would be finishing on May the 22nd because he was a big lad. He said he was out of shape, and gradually he's moved up from 40 odd K a day. Last night he did 160 to ensure that when we joined him, he only had 100 to go. He's finishing way ahead of schedule. He set off with an initial target of £5,000. We've now doubled it to 10. Oh, we're so close. £9,905. Great of the guys of Just Giving to help us out here today and over the last few weeks. We're on 99% of his reassessed total of 10 grand. And James Campbell has been waiting patiently. Apparently, we're only 60 quid away now. James, this will be a great moment for Jacob when we tickle 10 grand.
Yeah, exactly. What's that? I've been here for less than an hour, and it's been 1,500 quid? Oh no, £2,000 is it? More? Yeah.
Almost £2,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So it shows the momentum that it'll build, and you've still got a few hours to go yet, mate. So hopefully there's another 2 or 3 grand in there before the end of today, and then it'll just keep going. The more you get on the radio, and like I say, you said about some of the crazy places you've been interviewed, Nick and Jacob as well. It's I was on ESPN in America, so it's just you have no idea how far this will go. So it will keep building, and there's definitely a few more grand in there yet.
Nick, there's something almost sadistic about this, isn't there? Because I've got a cup of tea. My wife just brought in a brownie because I told her I'd probably be on here till 6 o'clock. It's almost like a physical version. Not that I used to watch Big Brother, but there's something deceptively
voyeuristic.
Yeah, I guess so. Of just looking at a bloke. Not moving an inch on his exercise bike. It's ridiculous how you can become absorbed.
It's probably some niche fetish to some people. So, so excellent work there, Jacob. I'm sure there's somebody that's loving you pumping away in Lycra. That's for sure. Yeah, it's it's a unique sport this afternoon and during the time that Jacob's been doing it. But the fact is, people are seeing the challenge, people are getting behind it, and we've got the opportunity here to witness a man who's putting it all on the line and ultimately is going to be raising over 10 grand, and that is absolutely bonkers, but to be cherished.
And you know, we've all had so much time to think over this bizarre period in between certain bouts of homeschooling. I've heard some choice words coming in here to the office from my wife, wrestling with our 6-year-old. I think there's a newfound admiration for teachers up and down the country because
salaries are set to soar, aren't they?
Yeah, it's not as easy as it seems. But you know, it is. There are two things I think that every nation around the world has huge sports fans, but I think what we do in such a unique way in Britain, we combine, and what you've done, Nick, is a classic example of this. I think our sense of humour is inherently and intrinsically linked to our love of sport. No better example of that than the London Marathon. I've been lucky enough to cover marathons all over the place, and nowhere in the world is there as wide a set of fancy dress as there is in the London Marathon. And our humour is absolutely linked to our love of sport in a way that I feel is slightly different to other countries. So we are perhaps the best nation to be watching people like James and Jacob doing these unusual challenges, because we love watching people who've got a sense of humour, don't we?
Yeah, and we love watching sport. It's a perfect combination for the idiocy that I've been putting out. And certainly they talk about the Australians and say, the old Aussies, they'd bet on 2 flies on a wall about their love of sport. But look, we will watch in this country. Is what I sort of tend to say. We'll watch the top 10, 20% of everything. People will watch the Wimbledon final. They'll watch the Silverstone Grand Prix. They'll watch the Grand National. They'll watch the Six Nations, the Euros, whatever it is. Like every sport will get a look in from most households in this country, even if it's just for the big events. And I don't know that you get that necessarily in all places around the world. I think it is part of our rich sporting heritage. I think the fact that an institution such as the BBC existed for so long as such a key broadcaster with some of the greatest anthems of sport that have ever existed, beautifully orchestrally put together. I'm reminded of the recent isolation challenge that the BBC Philharmonic was set, which I was retweeting a few days ago. All those magnificent sports themes, 79 of them from the BBC Philharmonic, managed to basically record their own parts of about a 6.5, 7 minute medley of our most treasured British sports themes. If you can't find it, I think it's on 5 Live in short. But yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. And actually, I got quite emotional by the end of listening to it, because it brings you there. It reminds you of all those kind of great British institutions, the opening theme to Wimbledon, the theme to Sports Report on 5 Live, all these kind of things. And this is why sport, I think, has the rich tapestry that it does, the history and the fondness for so many people. And as you say, you've then got the kind of sense of humour that goes with a British psyche. I know that a lot of the reason the stuff I've done has resonated in America is probably because of the stupid plummy British accent I put all over the top of it, but also just probably the touch of humour in there as well. And yeah, I think it's worked as a combination for me. But yeah, there's always a touch of enjoying the absurd from the likes of the Pythons and beyond. And I think there are certain countries and certain people that would look on Jacob in his room, working away, and go, "Sorry, how many people tuned in and how many people donated for that? That's ridiculous." And you'd go, "Yes, it is, and we're thoroughly proud of it as well."
Yeah, exactly, without any shadow of a doubt. I think I'm just hearing we only need 45 quid, and then we're over the 10 grand. Jacob, exactly how far left now, please?
57.4 kilometres.
Well, that is very exact. And how are the legs holding up after the 160k last night?
All right. I don't know if you saw, but I just knocked my knee a bit, which is, I thought it was going to spell disaster then. But yeah, they're fine. Legs are fine. I'm more worried about the bike giving out, if I'm honest with you. It's started that the pedaling motion has started to become a bit laboured, let's just say, over the last couple of days. So I'm just hoping it, touch wood, that it holds out and gets me there. Otherwise, I'll be strapping it on my back and running down the road with it to the last to the finish line.
Oh yeah, that would be the biggest anticlimax ever. And in fact, that just reminds me, British triathlete Mark Perkins, 2004, his bike failed in the Athens Olympics. And, triathlon is such a hard sport, so competitive. He ran back into transition 2, which is what they call it at the end of the bike, when you come off the bike and get rid of the cleats and then get your running shoes on for the 10K at the end. He came last by miles. He ran with his bike on his shoulders in the baking heat in Athens because he was determined to successfully finish the Olympic triathlon. Hard to believe that was 16 years ago. So there is precedent for it. If you do need to haul that big old beast down into the streets of London, it could be done. So you just keep going. James, we haven't heard from you in a while. Thank you for keeping us company. And Nick was just alluding earlier on there, as Jacob just stretches out his back and gives the farmer Giles a little bit of a rest. We'll definitely get him an advertising campaign for the farmers. What were the sports that you loved watching on the BBC and ITV when you grew up? Was it purely and simply athletics? Is that why you got into javelin, or were you keen on all sports that were available on the main broadcasters?
There was a bit of everything on the BBC, wasn't it? It was always the FA Cup was always the one on the BBC growing up. It was a massive deal, and the coverage was amazing. And then, they had golf, like the Masters coverage. I remember that really well. And then, Wimbledon, and then the Olympic coverage as well. The athletics coverage is, it gets a bit of flack sometimes, and for a little bit too much chat, but they still do a really good job, and we look forward to seeing it again soon, hopefully. It must be nearly 10 grand now, is it?
We're over. Jacob, £10,010, 359 supporters. Doreenio, with 20 quid and £5 gift aid. You are there, big boy. You have more than doubled your initial target, and we've still got, I reckon, just over an hour and a half to go. You're absolutely rattling through this. So, breaking news here on YouTube. What are you reassessing the goal to, if you are?
I mean, we went up by 5 before, so let's go up by 5 again, I reckon, to 15.
Oh, it's punchy. That is punchy. He's gone 5 to 10. And it's just gone up to 15 grand. That is superb. And apparently, we're now joined by Senior Product Manager of Just Giving, who's been brilliant at making sure we've got a big enough platform to try and do justice to this great achievement that Jacob is currently ploughing his way through. He's getting towards the halfway stage of this, the 41st and final ride of the 3,500 kilometers. So a very good afternoon to you, Jamie. And
Hello.
it brings back memories of the huge tally and the mentalness of James Campbell's 6-meter back garden. Hard to believe that the last time we spoke was that challenge, which was what, 3.5, 4 weeks ago. It's the time seems to have flown past. And here we go again with another unsung British hero raising tens of thousands for a great cause.
It does. Firstly, hey Jacob, how you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah. This is the combination of a number of bizarre emails and conversations we've had, but well done, buddy.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you so much.
And James, it's unusual to see you not in Lycra, or is that the right thing to say?
No one wants to say that.
Whatever messages you're exchanging in your own time is up to you, James.
Thank you, Dick. How are you recovering, James?
I was all right, Actually, it was the night I finished. My kneecaps felt like they were going to explode, and then for a couple of days was in quite a bit of pain. But then it settled down. I wish I'd done something else again by now. Like I say, if I had a bike, I think I'd have probably had a go. But no, fair play to him.
And more importantly, how's the shed? Has it been upgraded?
It's still horrendous. The lawn's been mown up. I finally jet washed the patio as well the other day, so it looks like a new garden. So all the haters, that's done now.
Good stuff. I think I was just dialing in. I think we've had the target updated for you. Sorry to put that on you, Jacob, but you gotta keep going, buddy. And I think it's 15,000 now.
Yeah, that's great. So let's hopefully we can get it there, eh? Be mad. 3 times the original total.
Magnificent.
I mean, I was blown away when it got to about 1,000. Because you don't expect these things to kind of gain momentum. But as it's been coming to the finish line, it's kind of picking up the momentum, and let's hope we can continue to keep it moving and smash that new target of 15k.
I think you will. I think I caught some of the conversation that I think you were leading on earlier, Rob, with the curiosities of British fundraisers, and if anything, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've really seen that come to the fore. So I've got every confidence, Jacob, that you'll surpass your target by the end of this evening, and with all the publicity that I suspect is probably coming your way in the next few days.
Hopefully I'll be able to put my legs up a bit before the next one. I was thinking the other day that I was going to climb Olympus Mons next, because everyone seems to be doing Everest. So why not go for the biggest mountain in the solar system? But I might give myself a week off before I think about doing that one.
Hey, listen, but by the time we get out of lockdown, you'll have bigger thighs than Sir Chris Hoy. Jamie, we were just talking earlier with Nick, who's enjoyed such great success with his brilliant kind of parody comedy, quintessentially British. Do you agree, and do you see the literal results of this for charities? Is there something idiosyncratic about us and the type of causes that capture our imagination? Or are we being a little bit too self-congratulatory in thinking that we're a bit different to other countries?
No, absolutely not. I think, like, we a month and a half ago, we at Just Giving were worried when this whole COVID thing started, and the London Marathon effectively was cancelled on the 13th of March, and everybody in the industry was looking at a real potential deficit. At the same time, every year we have these things called the Just Giving Awards, and we have people who've run multiple marathons, who have done crazy and wonderful different fundraisers. So it's not a new phenomenon, I'd say. I think every year we see these types of individuals come up with creative ideas. I think just right now, everything's being amplified and in the microcosm that we're in. And I think people, I can't remember who said it previously, but people want good news stories at the moment, because if you turn on the news, it's understandably, it's kind of doom and gloom and quite dark. And then you've got individuals, whether it's Captain Tom, whether it's James, running up and down his garden, or Jacob in his flat, giving us something interesting to tune into and to get behind and to rally behind. So I just think it's certainly amplified at the moment. I wouldn't say the British are any more crazy or strange than other fundraisers around the world, but I just happen to see more of it here in the UK.
And long may that continue. And by the way, Jacob, I don't know how well you can see the screen. You've been joined by a fellow rider. Now, I'm assuming it says Amber Ritchie's there, but is that actually Keith Farquharson? Oh, you're on mute. I think he's joining us.
Hello, there we go.
Is that you, Keith?
There we go.
Me, yes.
Well, good afternoon to you. And I know you are more than familiar with Jacob's journey. Inform people who don't know the indoor journey that you're currently grinding your way through, and why.
So much like Jacob, it seemed like a good idea to take on the Tour de France. I'm in shielding because I've got stage 4 cancer, so I can't go out. Sorry, bit of a hill. So I've already owned a turbo trainer, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go. I'll see how far I can get. You can load the GPS files into the software, so it puts in the routes and it puts in the altitude, and it puts in the climb, and then it deals with the resistance for the hills. So I'm gradually working my way around the 2018 Tour. I'm currently in northern France. Hopefully finishing stage 7 tomorrow at Chartres. The scenery is lovely. I mean, it looks a lot like my kitchen, but lovely nonetheless.
Pick me up a couple of pain au chocolats on your way through, would you?
I'll see what I can do.
Absolutely wonderful. And maybe a crate of Kronenberg while you're at it. Lovely.
Have you tell us the admiration you have there for Jacob, because by his own admission, he's nowhere near as experienced a cyclist as you are, but he's a hell of a lot closer to his finish line than you are to yours. So you'll have an idea of what he's going through right now. Yeah,
he's putting in a lot more miles than I am. So I'm fitting this in around work. I've got childcare, work, everything else. But I'm putting in at most a couple of hours a day. I don't think I could sit on the bike for 100 miles. It would drive me mad. So to do 100 miles yesterday and then, what, another 60 plus today? Nah.
Yeah, you're all right.
Yeah, I'm fine with 50k, 60k is all right. I can do that. Sorry, hill. Sight problems.
Do you get any warning that the hills are coming?
A bit. I've got a profile line, and it gives you an idea that something's coming, but it'll give you. Sorry, tells you what the gradient is you're on, and what the next gradient is, and the countdown to it. So you kind of.
You carry on. You take your breath as you need it.
I think that's almost worse, knowing that the big hill is coming. But I suppose you would do out on the roads because you'd see it. I almost think ignorance is bliss in that regard, perhaps.
Yeah, there's bits of it are okay. There's bits which are just. I'm kind of, in a way, I'm looking forward to the Alps.
That's quite nice, though, if you're doing the bit where you feel it's going up, because very shortly you're going to be going down the other side. So
yeah,
and goes up and all that.
The other thing is because it's all up or all down. But the sort of hilly bits, you're kind of going up the gears, down the gears.
Yeah.
At least when you hit Tourmalet or Alpe d'Huez, it's just put it in the lowest gear, grit your teeth, and keep going. Hopefully, I'll tell you how easy that is when I get there. Good, 9%. Sorry, minor intermission.
Jacob, are you getting bike envy, or are you quite happy with your little static beauty?
I'm quite happy for Keith to take on the hills. I mean, this is why I wanted to get him on. Actually, I thought, let's pass the torch a bit, and because I think it's absolutely phenomenal what Keith's doing, with his story, and the charity he's raising it for is obviously very close to his start. So hopefully there can be a little bit of a passing of the torch, and we can all follow Keith on his journey now. That I'm finishing mine, and help him to reach his targets as well. Because I may be doing this on a little trainer, an exercise bike that your mum might have, but he's actually doing. You doing the 2018 tour, Keith?
Yeah, John Thomas.
The James one, isn't it? When he won, so he's following in there and doing the ups, doing the inclines and everything, as well as the distance, which is absolutely phenomenal. So big respect to Keith, and that's kind of why I wanted to get him on today and make sure he gets the platform that he deserves as well, because it's absolutely phenomenal what he's doing. And I think if I probably couldn't have done it on that kind of trainer.
I haven't finished yet. Cool.
Well, Jacob, we're just hearing you've got 50k to go. How long on your ride, Keith, today?
Today, let's have a look. 41k.
Oh, well, you're almost matching each other K by K. And presumably, maintaining your fitness at this high level is helping you with the wider battle, if we call it that.
Yeah, it's yeah, it does help, and it takes your mind off it. So I started running last year before. So when I was first diagnosed with cancer, I started chemo, and they said, the fitness level will make a big difference to how you handle the side effects. Oh, all right. So I kept cycling throughout chemo, but I started running again. Downhill, thank God. So then I took part in the 2019 Great North Run, because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Much like this. Less so at about 1 mile to go when you're overtaken by a puffin, but yeah, it all helped, and something quite therapeutic about just not thinking about anything, just the next hill as it happens.
Well, listen, don't overdo yourself, Keith. Many congratulations on what you've done so far. Just watch yourself on those inclines. So we've got Keith Farquharson, who's currently navigating his way around literally at the hills, almost literally, of the 2018 tour won by Geraint Thomas. On the line, as well as Jamie and Nick, we now have Rhea Doherty from the Big Issue Foundation, individual giving and comms manager. And Rhea, all of you at the foundation must be absolutely delighted and so proud of Jacob's efforts, because we are now on around about 10,100 plus change. But it's not just the money, is it? It's the profile he's brought to a charity and a foundation that could easily be forgotten whilst everybody's worried about putting food on their own tables at a time like this.
Absolutely, Rob. Just wanted to say it's been so emotional watching this stream, seeing all the donations come in. Like when we hit 10k, I thought I was going to cry. Jacob's been such an amazing supporter. Hi, Jacob. He's been posting on Instagram every day, and he created filters. And one of my highlights of his journey has been the day one of his friends donated and forced him to listen to Britney Spears nonstop for 2 hours, I think. That was a fun day for you, Jacob, eh?
Tough day for me.
But yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. As you said, like lots of people have got involved with it, and it's really raised the profile of the Big Issue Foundation. A lot of people don't realize we're actually quite a small charity. So we're the charitable arm of the Big Issue magazine, which everybody knows about. But we're only a staff of 25 supporting vendors all across the country. And of course, the lockdown has hit vendors really, really hard. Like overnight, 2,000 vendors just lost their income. A lot of them relied on day-to-day money coming in, didn't have a lot of savings, and a lot are in vulnerable situations. So the funds that are coming in are just going to make such a huge difference. It's little things that we don't think about. It's keeping food on the table, but also just like making sure the lights stay on and things like that. That's the kind of things that this money is going to help with, and also some fun stuff. We've had some really cool things that we've been able to do for vendors. Like we have been getting pet food for vendors, including one vendor who has a pet snake, and we had to source a delivery of frozen mice. So, so that was fun. And
he sleeps on the streets with a snake, or has he got accommodation?
He had some form of accommodation. The snake was not rough sleeping, but he was struggling to find anywhere that was going to help. So we were helping with that. And one of our favorites from the last week as well is a vendor who is isolating with one of his kids. We managed to get them a subscription to the Beano so they could read it together and have some great like family time. So there are like really serious things that we are supporting, like making sure people are fed, that they're indoors, that they have electricity. But also, a lot of people are alone, and just all the things that you're struggling with, vendors are struggling with too. So it's been really cool to have Jacob do this. And I mean, the target was £5,000 originally, like you all know, and we were like, oh wow, if he could raise £5,000, that would be amazing. And now we've got over 10,000. I just can't believe it. It's so amazing.
It's a phenomenal tally, and they've upped it now to 15 grand.
Yeah.
Jamie is a hard taskmaster, so he's gone from 100% of the tally, and he's back down now to 67. But hopefully he will creep back up towards the 100% again as the afternoon progresses. And I don't suppose you've got any updates on the man who inspired Jacob to choose the foundation, Stevie, have you? Because Jacob's been telling us earlier on this afternoon that it was meeting Stevie, and Stevie being such an upbeat, buoyant presence on the street that made him connect with the Big Issue. So do you have an update on how Stevie is? Because Jacob doesn't know since your guys were pulled off the streets on March the 22nd. He doesn't know where Stevie is or if he's safe and well.
Yeah, I believe Stevie is accommodated, so he is indoors, and our frontline team is keeping in touch with most vendors on a weekly basis. So we are touching base with everybody, and we have been getting lots of messages of support from the public, and lots of people are really concerned about their local vendors. So we're really trying to pass on as many messages of support to the vendors too, because that is like something that's really keeping them motivated during this time. They're really missing their customers, not just for selling the magazine, but that interaction that like we're all missing a lot. So we're trying to get those messages across as much as possible. The Big Issue's launched a campaign called The Big Miss You. You can follow that on social media as well. If you do have a vendor that you want to keep in touch with and send messages of support to, please check out on social media, and you can find out ways where we can keep connected with vendors until the lockdown is over and they can be back, on the street selling the magazine.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, it's good to know that Stevie has been accommodated, and that you're working so hard to remind the vendors that they're not on their own, or they might be literally, but people are still thinking about them. Jamie, just bringing you back in for a second, I guess in a funny kind of way, it's probably been amongst the busiest periods you guys have ever had, thanks to people like Keith, who's still grinding it out in the top corner, and Jacob, center frame here with the yellow jersey. Have you been surprised at the range and the volume of activities people are thinking up to raise a few quid for causes that are close to their hearts?
Yeah, absolutely. has it been the busiest week? I think if you asked our engineering team and our PR team, they would laugh you out of the room. It's been incredible busy last couple of weeks with Captain Tom. When you have an individual fundraiser that I think has now taken the world's biggest online fundraiser title, then basically all the normal rules go out the window a little bit. We've been in PR overload. Felix, our PR guy, I think if he could leave the house and go and sit on an island for a couple of weeks, would do so. But like I said earlier, I think what we've seen is events be cancelled. And so all those marathons, all those 5Ks, all those 10Ks and cycles and velothons that people wanted to do have stopped. And then what they've done is people have just said, you know what, I'll find my own way of doing something different. And last week we had something called the 2.6 challenge, which was designed to try and replace the shortfall that the London Marathon, by being cancelled, would leave. And I think over the course of pretty much Saturday and Sunday of last week, it was a bit of a 2.6 kind of takedown. People were doing, they were basically interpreting 2.6 in any way they wanted to. So whether it was 26 miles around the garden, whether it was 26 times up and down the stairs, 2.6, I don't know, throwing things into bins. I think Will Greenwood of rugby was doing something in that area. People just took to it, and we're calling it virtual fundraising. It's like, how do you do something that's entertaining and inspiring, and causes people to want to support you? And people have been doing that in their thousands. It's been fantastic, and perversely, it's been an incredibly busy month for us. We should all work at home more often at Just Going.
Oh, and has there been a genuine danger, do you think, and hopefully people's efforts are helping many charities to avoid this scenario, have you genuinely seen a possibility that many charities could go under?
Yeah, I'm not as close to that information, but from the articles that I read and the people that I follow, there is that concern. I'm seeing plenty of people that I've interacted and worked with in the past being furloughed. So I think organisations are having to cut their cloth. Who knows? A lot of them will bank on bringing organised event fundraising back in the future, and we don't know what 3 weeks looks like, let alone 4 or 5 months' time. I know the London Marathon, as an example, has been, I think, moved to October.
October the 4th.
Right, and they're maybe now talking about that as elite runners only, or elite and club maybe, and not fundraisers, which is, not what charities I'm sure would probably want to hear. So I'm sure there are many of them struggling. Absolutely. I think also it's interesting. We're in a period of Ramadan at the moment, and a lot of Ramadan giving is offline. So people giving at mosques and people giving money in hand, in cash in hand, things like that. People can't do that. So people are having to try and work out how they bring that online through lots of different platforms that can support that. And we hope that people can give easily online and continue to plug some of that gap for organisations. We really do. But I'm looking at Jacob grimacing. Sorry. Keep going, mate. Sorry. Is it me talking?
I think it was that 160 last night that's kind of done my legs in a bit. But 45k to go, easy.
Sure, that's nothing now. You did 160 yesterday. 45 is nothing. I was just gonna add on to what Jamie said. I think when the lockdown happened and everyone had to go home, I think fundraisers across the country and probably globally did panic for a second. Can we fundraise at this time? Whether you're a charity who's directly affected by this or not, all charities are affected by this because the focus of everything has been on things that are affected by the lockdown. And like Jamie said, like all your fundraising now has to be done digitally. There isn't another way that we can easily raise funds right now, and it's been amazing. Like to have things like Just Giving really is making a huge difference to charities right now. So yeah, it's really fantastic, and I think the fundraising communities really come together as well, and a lot of staff have been furloughed, but then they've been volunteering for other charities and lending their skills in other ways. And we've all been really supportive of each other, which is really amazing. So yeah, it's been an interesting time, but you know, the charity community is fighting to stay here.
Yes, and long may the hard work continue. By the way, we missed an opportunity there to say thank you to Nick Heath. He's just signed off, but if anyone else is
Bye, Nick.
tuning in who knows Nick and can give him a message, it's a big thumbs up there from Jacob. Nick's career has gone from strength to strength under lockdown, and we were delighted to get him for half an hour. Well, come on, Jacob. I'm beginning to sense that you're having to crank it out here a little bit. You're feeling this, but we are, 7 minutes to 4, and you're on course to finish comfortably. Well, what do you make it? I'm kind of off the top of my head thinking 5:30, maybe just a shade before.
Yeah, it's about an hour and a half, I think.
What is the pace that you cycle at, Jacob?
It's about 30k. So, well, between 25 and 30k. This thing can't go much above 30k. So,
and does it have a set resistance?
No, it's on 7 though, out of 8. So
Wow.
It's a bit. It's been a bit much, but yeah, I've been doing that from the beginning, so I don't really want to drop it now.
And why did you, out of 8, you know, you could have been, it's a Herculean undertaking. You could have been forgiven for thinking, well, okay, look, I'll split the difference. I'll go 4. Why did you pick 7 in particular?
I mean, it was just on 7 when I started.
I love that. That is a quintessentially British answer. It was like that when I sat on it. So I thought, you know, blanket, that will do.
I'm not gonna start researching stuff now. I mean, like, you know, started this without knowing how long the Tour de France was. So just get on with it and get it done, really.
What do you think you'll do with the bike afterwards? Are you going to go back to hanging your clothes on it?
I'm gonna burn it. No, I'll probably go back to hanging my clothes on it, yeah, and get out on the road. Because you know, I don't really want to sit on it for a while after this, because the agony that my rear end is in at the minute is yeah, not great. But I can only imagine it would have been so much worse if I hadn't had that bit of advice from Big G about getting some cycling shorts. So props to him for that one.
Yes, well, I mean, he knows what he's talking about, having won the Tour. Couple of messages. I don't know whether you've had a chance to read these. Kimbers says, home straight, Jakey boy. Let's smash the new target. Malcolm has written, congratulations. What's next? The Transcontinental or the Silk Road Mountain Race? ... You know you want to. Helen's written unbelievable, and Ryan Kelly has written, well done, mate. It's just an amazing effort. They keep on coming, as does the money. You are now well over £10,100, and still we wait for that tally to grow. If you are tuning in, Just Giving have put us on their homepage. You're watching here on our YouTube channel, Lockdown Live. We've been featuring many different sports and games happening in back gardens up and down the country and abroad as well. If you're just finishing work, if you've been working from home and you're turning the work elements of your laptop off, spread the word and come back and join us. The man in the yellow jersey is in the driving seat with what, Chris? 48 point what?
42 now.
42 kilometers to go. So he's edging it. That's a marathon. You run a marathon, it's 42.5K. So he is definitely on the home straight. But you can tell here, Jacob Hill-Gowing is beginning to hit the metaphorical wall. 3,500 kilometers raising money for the Big Issue Foundation, and doing so sensationally here. He was supposed to keep going until May the 22nd, but as he has grown in fitness and confidence, so the length of the rides has gone up, and absolutely superb. He started off, 2 hours a day. He's on his 41st and final ride, and he is now almost down to 41K to go. It's been an amazing journey. And Ria, I think you need to get together with this guy and buy him a pint when lockdown finishes, because the Big Issue Foundation owes him a massive pat on the back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely down for getting that drink when this is all over. I have never taken on anything quite like that. I have done the London Marathon. That almost killed me. So I can't imagine what cycling 3,500 kilometers on a exercise bike in your spare rooms really really like. But yeah, it's absolutely amazing, and just the difference this is going to make to like big issue vendors across the country, just people like your local vendor Stevie, it's going to be absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you for everyone on YouTube that's tuning in as well. And Rob, thanks for putting this together, because it's absolutely amazing. I'm going to disappear, but I will come back when you're about to get into Paris.
Oh yeah, that's the champagne. That'll be the champagne moment, and we will be virtually putting our arms around him.
Yes. All right, I'll see you in a bit, guys. You got this, Jacob.
That's Ria Doherty, her voice. She's the individual giving and communications manager at the Big Issue Foundation, who are understandably elated, delighted, and immensely grateful to Jacob for all that he has done. Supposed to finish on May the 22nd, and he's wrapping it up here on May the 1st, just in time for a virtual pint just towards the end. Come on, Jacob, keep it going. I'm just getting some information in my ear. Chris, you're going to need to say that again. Ben Stefanovska has just donated. Oh, Ben, Steph, and Oscar. I thought it was Ben Stefanovska. Fancy surname. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear yellow jerseys. So proud of you, mate. Final straight now. Stay strong. Who are Ben, Steph, and Oscar? Do you work with them?
That is one of my mates, Ben. I've known him since I was in infant school, and I've been at school with him. Was at school with him my entire life, so a very good old friend there. Known him for about 24, 25 years now. So yeah, awesome.
Well, there are apparently, I can't get YouTube to load here, believe it or not. Chris, if you get any messages from YouTube that you want me to read out, just let me know. I've got a producer in my ear putting this all together for free, as we should do, to try and give Jacob the biggest platform possible. And if you're involved on Twitter, send us a tweet. Jacob's on @LatourDeFlat. Normal spellings, all one word. And I'm on @RobWalkerTV. And it is fantastic to see Jacob grinding out these last 100 kilometers on this 3,500K journey to raise money for the Big Issue vendors. He is still smiling. He's hit his knee from his trusty old exercise bike. Do you know, Jacob, I've almost got images. You know, when you watch a cartoon and the character gets out of a car, slams the door, and then bit by bit, the car just sort of disintegrates into 50,000 pieces on the road. I wonder, touch wood, once this bike has got us across the line, or got you across the line, maybe you're going to have to scrap it. I think you've absolutely hammered this thing.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Just feeling that, just checking the pedal because I think it's coming off. But yeah, it's absolutely taken an absolute battering. Yeah, it'll be with a heavy heart that I have to scrap it, but it might just be for the best because yeah, I don't know how much. I checked the other day, and it was something like I've done something like 3,600 kilometers on it or something since I've had it. So that gives you an example of how much I actually used it before I've done it, because you take 3,400 kilometers off of that, and it's about 200K. So yeah, I think it's done its time well, but it might have to go into retirement, unfortunately.
Well, and it will be retired well. I have got a couple of these YouTube comments now. Tony Burke has written, "What are you going to do tomorrow?" So what are you going to do tomorrow? Good question from Big Tone.
He is big as well, Tony Burke. But, I don't know. Probably have a rest. Probably have a lie-in. I haven't really slept for the last week. You know, I only decided to finish it Friday on Monday. And there was 637 kilometres to go. So I've been hitting over 100 kilometres a day. And when I'm starting at 6, that's you're going into going very late. So I'll probably just have a lie-in, if I'm honest with you, and then get up and think what I'm going to do next with my life. But yeah, have a sleep, I think.
Yes, I think a lie-in and a massive fry-up, and then your favourite box set with an entire packet of chocolate digestives and a cup of tea. Carl Gilbert has said, hike up Olympus next. Well, you've alluded to that. Nimrod Hicks. I wonder if that's his or her real name. A puncture now would be heartbreaking. Yes, it would. Sophie Peck, you can do it, Jakey. Push through and just focus on that champagne at the finish line. We're all rooting for you. Tony Burke has come back in and said, I've only just noticed the helmet. Emma Chung, watch her, Jake. Resistance on 7, a new level of respect for you. Well, speaking of respect, your epic exploits have got the attention of some of cycling's most important journalists, broadcasters and experts, and I'm reliably informed. We'll get back to you, James Campbell, as well in just a moment. Thank you, 6-metre back garden man, for signing back in. We'll get to James in just a moment. But I think we can now introduce journalist and cycling author Rebecca Charlton and Ian Cleverly, the executive producer of Roulet. So good afternoon and welcome to both of you. What a brilliant effort from this big guy. He might not have as much experience as you two on a bike, but he's doing the sport proud here, isn't he?
Oh, he certainly is. And he's making it look so easy. Look at that spinning. So smooth. I mean, I guess you've had quite a lot of time to get that smooth, though, haven't you?
I mean, just a bit. I think I'm close to about 150 hours on the bike in the last month or so. So, yeah, my Strava stats have kind of gone through the roof, and I'll probably fall off a cliff again once this is done. Enjoy that peak whilst it's there.
I don't know about you, Rebecca, but I was thinking once he's had a little lie down for a few days, we need to get him down a Herne Hill. Look at that pedaling, that cadence.
Definitely.
He'd be great on the track. He'd be great on the track.
Yeah, Ian and I do a lot of track racing on the velodrome, and yeah, you've got the perfect pedaling technique there for the track.
Well, I've always had legs like tree trunks, so maybe it's the time to put them to good use.
Listen, mate, didn't do Chris Hoy any harm, did it?
Yeah, I was alluding to his thighs being fairly sizable, or certainly more sizable than they were before this challenge began. I got a question whilst we let Jacob just concentrate for a few kilometres. A question to both of you, really, to Ian and Rebecca. I come at this more from, I'm an out-and-out runner. I've got huge respect for cyclists, and I love the stamina element of it because I love covering marathons. It seems to me, I used to watch the Tour de France in the 80s when I was getting into athletics, and then kind of drifted away from cycling to focus on running. I cannot believe I live in a fairly rural area, and as a runner now, I am in a tiny minority. The quantity of little groups I see out cycling and the pelotons and the clubs, and it's triathlon riders and it's full-on cycling club members as well. Cycling seems to me to have absolutely boomed in Britain over the last 15 years. When you both first started in the sport, could you ever have believed that there would be this volume of people connected to your sport? It's been incredible.
Well, there's two different answers to that, because Rebecca is a whole generation younger than me, right? But when I was a kid and I first started racing and cycling, it was a sport for weirdos. Yeah, you dressed in weird gear. You didn't even have lycra. It was baggy, saggy, woolen, and you kind of did it because you were a weirdo, because you couldn't play rugby. You know what I mean? If you're a skinny beanpole like me, it's like I just used to get battered in team sports, and yet I got on a bike and I was good. So I thought, this is great, and I actually like being a weirdo and being an outsider. And Rebecca, I mean, you can take over on this, but when you came in, it was probably still a bit like that. But then you've been, right in the middle of that whole change.
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly the same for me. It was massively uncool. I didn't want to tell my school friends. It was a complete weirdo sport. But I started racing at 7 years old, so I definitely still was coming into that sport when nobody was watching it on TV. No one knew anything about it. We were wearing these weird pointy helmets that no one really understood. And especially, when you're going into the race level, there's a lot of odd kit to people that don't know what any of this means. But to see that changed and where the sport is now, as Ian says, is absolutely phenomenal. And I've been talking a lot during lockdown in interviews like this with people who are asking similar questions. And it has given me the opportunity to reflect back on what the sport was like when I discovered it and where it is now. And it is just phenomenal. And I do have to reflect and pinch myself that the sport is so loved in this country and worldwide now.
And I guess a huge part of that will be the fact that it's accessible. And I think running and cycling in particular under lockdown, both sports will have thrived even further because it has been one of the few things you can do legitimately on your own whilst adhering to the rules. But I guess a fair portion of the popularity in Britain is in no small part down to the incredible road and track success of the British men and women who are now at the very top of the world, on the roads and in the velodromes.
A massive part of it, the whole Brad Wiggins, Chris Hoy, Mark Cavendish. I think without Nicole Cook, obviously, Victoria Pendleton, but without those people, it's hard to imagine cycling being on, for several hours on British TV on an afternoon. It's just like, even on the red button, it just wouldn't have happened. It was such a fringe sport. So they take a massive part of the credit for putting sport where it is, for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with that massively. Sorry, just to interject there, sort of on the women's side, when I started racing as a youngster, when I first did the national championships in Manchester, I was the only girl in the whole country to race. So I raced in with the boys. And, it's such a far cry from that. And I think what's been so pivotal on the female side of the sport is having the visible role models that I didn't necessarily have when I started racing. So that sort of Olympic success, the Nicole Cooks, Vicky Pendletons, Laura Kenny now, have just been pivotal in making a career in cycling visible.
And another question for you, whilst we let Jacob concentrate. Again, I'm coming at this from a position of huge admiration for cycling, but I'm not an expert because my love of distance stuff is revolves around running. How do you ensure that on a club level, the sport remains accessible from a financial point of view? Because I guess the thing with running, you whack a pair of shoes on, if the shoes aren't that good, it doesn't matter. You can put on any old singlet. And I guess it's really important that not everybody who comes into cycling is going to be from the sort of socio-economic background where they can afford 4 or 5 grand for a bike. So I guess, it's amazing that so many people are cycling, but I suppose there are people like you two making big efforts to ensure that on a practical financial level, if you're good enough, you should still have the chance to make it, even if your wallet or your parents' wallet isn't particularly big. Have you had to make quite conscious efforts to ensure the sport is still accessible from that side of things?
Personally, I think that is remains one of the biggest hurdles, and will remain so. I mean, I take this back to when I first started, when I was a kid, and I went round to my mate's house and I was chatting to his mum, and she said, I thought that when he started cycling, I would just buy my bicycle and be it. And then like she opened the shed door and there were 4 bikes and 10 pairs of wheels and blah, blah, blah. It's expensive sport, no two ways about it. There are less expensive branches of the sport. As we mentioned earlier, the track in Herne Hill where we go to, you don't need a bike that costs thousands of pounds to do that. It's a way more accessible branch of the sport. You just need a cheap old bike, no gears, no brakes, off you go, and that's a good way in, but once you get to a higher level, there's no two ways. It's prohibitively expensive, and that's a hard one to get past.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I think, Ian and I, as you alluded to, have got a role in this to point people in the direction of parts of the sport that are more accessible. And mentioning Herne Hill Velodrome again, it's a local track for Ian and I, and we've sort of not only ridden there and raced there a lot ourselves, but we've really seen the youth development. And there's, scarily some kids. I've known them since they were kids. Now adults very much stepping up into the World Tour leagues, and very successfully so. And they started off on the track with a free hire bike available to them, which they do for the youth and kids sessions. And so you can hop on a hire bike, you can give it a go. There's school clubs where parents can leave the kids, and that has seen a lot of youngsters progress to the very top of the sport. So I think whilst it can be prohibitive, there are avenues. And also in terms of kit, I always try to say to people, yes, it is very nice to be kitted out in the top stuff. However, places like Decathlon actually do some pretty decent stuff at a really low budget. So I think it's just not intimidating people and scaring them off from the sport at the first sort of level.
Yeah, and it sounds like with people like you two, with the grassroots passion, you can ensure that the talent gets through to such a level, and then the resources come for the really fancy bikes. It's just a question I've always been keen to ask, connoisseurs of cycling, for people who are coming at it from a less advantageous financial background. And actually, we've got a brilliant example of you don't need expensive kit in front of us here. Jacob, going well on the old exercise bike that was at one stage just a mere clothes horse, and you have ridden this baby almost to 3,500 kilometers. What's the exact distance left?
I'm just waiting for it to kick over. It's a bit of an Alan Partridge moment. My maths ain't that good. 33 kilometers to go.
Oh, this is superb. Well, the last time you asked us, you were about 42. So 33. Couple of YouTube messages. Helen Lindsay, I donated back when you first started. You've done amazingly well. We're watching from Essex as you approach your finish line. David Steed, cracking effort, mate. When this is all over, fancy a ride to Paris, finish on the Champs-Élysées. Yeah, loads. And then E. Johnson has said, when you do this again, wow, that's punchy. When you do this again, what background images or banners would you hang up to share with us? So what kind of motivational slogans do you think you would put up if you undertook a similar challenge in future? And actually, just describe to us what you can see from behind the camera. Have you got pictures of heroes on the walls, or behind where we're looking from? Is it just a blank wall? What have you been staring at for 41 rides?
Pretty blank, if I'm honest with you. None of the amazing countryside that you'd get on the real tour. I think if I did it again, I'd actually do the actual tour. I don't think I'd do this again, because it's been so mentally draining. Just at some points it's just been quite hard going. But you've got to remember what you're doing it for. But I don't know about. That's a bit of artwork I did behind me. So I don't know what I'd have on the walls. I think I'd knock them down and do it outside. I'd say my advice to anyone thinking about doing this, and I think Keith will say the same thing, is don't do it, because it's absolutely stupid. Especially, especially when you're just stuck in a tiny one-bedroom flat, and you're basically looking at half of my flat right now. So yeah, I'd say get out on the road and do it out on the road.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question from E. Johnson is if he does anything like this again, it will be outdoors, hopefully, when lockdown is finished. I've got loads more questions for Ian and Rebecca, but just before we go back to them once again, I don't know whether you've still got your microphone on, Keith Farquharson. How are you doing on today's ride? Because the last time we spoke to you, you had a similar duration left to ride to that which faced our yellow jersey man in the foreground. So how's your stage of the 2018 tour progressing this afternoon?
Fortunately, just hit a bit downhill, so you give me a bit of a breather. Just under 25k to go. Should be done in just over an hour, hopefully. With any luck. A couple of minor hills, but nothing too bad. Yeah.
And
all right.
Will you be, when you finished each of your stages, have you been rewarding yourself with a pint, or are you one of these abstemious types? Is your body a temple and you're living a monastic lifestyle around the 2018 tour?
I've been meeting up with mates on Wednesdays over Zoom, and all taking on the same stage at the same time, so we all ride together. So that started the fourth section of the first stage, and we thought, well, what I normally do, because I have treatment on every other Tuesday, I have immunotherapy at the Bobby Robson Centre. So I thought, well, I normally have a day off and a ride the day after with a mate of mine. So we thought we'd continue the tradition. But normally we stop for a pint about halfway. So we stopped in the lovely town of Vix. After about an hour's riding, had a beer, had a chat, and a lovely bistro that looked, again, very much like my kitchen.
Yeah.
And then back on the bike and continued for the last hour. And been doing that every week. It's quite nice. So yeah, not abstemious.
Yeah, that's good to hear. You need a couple of beers every now and again. Let's bring Ian and Rebecca back in. Again, opinions from the experts. How much harder is a challenge like this, do you think, when you're physically on your own, as opposed to enjoying the camaraderie and the occasional slipstreaming opportunity of being with mates out on the roads for real? How much tougher would this challenge be, riding solo as Jacob has been doing in his flat for the last 40 days?
Oh, immeasurably. And it's not just the actual physical thing of being outdoors. I've actually, after a lifetime of denying this whole indoor training thing. I mean, I had an indoor trainer and I gave it away about 3 years ago. I was like, it was just cluttering up the garden. Gave it away. Thought I'm never doing that again. And then, of course, lockdown occurs. I was like, darn, I need a trainer. So I managed to land one. And there's various indoor training app things that you can do where you're effectively riding with other people. And it's great. It makes such a difference. And I went on it thinking, well, I hate video games. You know what I mean? This is not going to be for me. I'm too old, blah, blah, blah. And within 2 sections, I was absolutely hooked. You're actually riding along with other people's avatars. They're giving you all that stuff. But to do what Jacob is doing, staring at the flat walls, no, I couldn't do it. Hats off to him.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I just think for us, we explore the psychology of cycling a lot, and as you can imagine, it plays such a huge part as in any sport. And to not have that stimulation of a group of even just chatting, as much as it's incredible to see so many messages coming in online, and it's changed the way we're viewing so much during this lockdown. I think the sense of community has been wonderful, but I think the challenge, as Ian said, of just having the same view for that amount of time, and not physically being in a group, someone being able to put a hand on your back and say you're doing great, I think that's immensely challenging. Incredible job.
And how do you, when you're in the midst of a really tough race, how do you get your head past the pain in cycling? Because with marathon running, I've got a really good mate of mine who's a brilliant marathon runner, and he works out, he's really clever as well, one of these golden ball types who can do everything. He sets himself really difficult mathematical equations which he has to solve. I'd be absolutely hopeless at that. I tend to count my strides. Are there any little things that that pop up time and again in cycling that you can do to break a distance down mentally? Do you break it down into fractions? I remember when Bradley Wiggins broke the 1 hour record, I think he was breaking it down into chunks of 12 minutes or 10 minutes and almost trying to kid himself that the next chunk was the last one. What are the things that you at the elite level do to try and take your mind off the pain and the distance still to come?
When you say you at the elite level, I mean, I'm not speaking for Rebecca here, but I just to make it clear, we talk about these people. We talk about these people. We don't do it. Okay. Question one on our podcast this week, we had a rider called Luke Rowe from Team Ineos, and he was talking about his teammate Rowan Dennis, who is fantastic at time trials. Now, riders that are fantastic at time trials tend to be a very different mindset. They're a bit odd. Rowan definitely falls into the a bit odd category, right? Lovely man, fantastic guy, but he's obsessed by numbers. If he's walking up the stairs in his house, he says, I have to break it down into sevens. I do 7, and then I turn a corner, and then I do 3, and then Luke says he got into another fantastic ex-world champion time trials, Fabian Cancellara. And Fabian says, I really enjoyed listening to that podcast when you talk about numbers. He says, I do exactly the same. The second I stepped into this lift, I figured out, okay, I'm going to the 5th floor, you're going to the 3rd floor, there's 2 of us in the lift, that makes that's what they do in their heads. They break, it's what you said earlier about that breaking it down into chunks, and somehow they seem to have that ability to do that. Now that applies to time trials. How the guys do it in road races, I don't know. They just kind of cut from a different cloth. But I'm the only successful time trials I ever did in my pathetic career. One, I got cut out by a car right at the start, and I was so pumped, full of adrenaline, that I just went off like a rocket, and I never stopped. I go figure. I have no idea how that works. The other one, my saddle almost dropped off halfway around the course because it just came loose. And again, it was some adrenaline thing kicked in. But I personally don't have that ability to overcome the pain. I'm useless at it. I don't. Rebecca's got any top tips. Well, Rebecca's more on this. She does more sort of coachy advice. So no, she's no.
No, I mean, you're being very modest about your cycling career there, Ian, but it does sound quite a similar story to me. I've never been able to do well in time trials or pursuits on the track. Team pursuit, different when I used to race, because I like to chase the carrot. So for me, looking at the guys like Sir Bradley Wiggins that are doing the hour record, for me, to even start to think about that focus and that level of pain for an hour is just phenomenal, and very alien to me. And I'm probably saying the same as for you, Ian, in terms of bunch racing on the road, when you're chasing someone down, when there's a move going and there's all that adrenaline. I absolutely love it, but for me, I've never been able to kind of look at that huge volume of time being on my own like a time trial and think, yeah, that's for me. But that said, I think in sort of amateur rides and sportives and things that I've done and helped other riders with, things like London to Paris, I think it is, as we discussed before, just about breaking it down, because I just don't think you can look at these things as a whole. And for me, certainly, it's how many miles till a lunch stop, or when we have a little break at this point. And I'm constantly breaking that down, because if I just looked at it as, right, 3 days of this mileage or whatever. I think that's overwhelming for anyone.
Oh, and speaking of overwhelming, come on, Jacob, you can do this. Come on. We're with you virtually, mate. There's people watching. You've smashed your target. You're well over 10 grand. Let me read you out some more notes. Lee, Joe, and Blake say, fantastic work. We're so proud of you. Reese and Becca, fantastic work, Jakey. So proud of you. Not long to go. Keep it up. An anonymous comment. Thanks for the stupendous effort. You are almost there, mate. We can feel your pain. You've got Ian here who provided you with the chamois cream and the shorts. You've got Rebecca Charlton, a brilliant track cyclist, journalist, author. You've got your partner in crime virtually, Keith Farquharson, tackling the tour from 2018. Come on, you can do this. 27 kilometers to go. Is this, if you can spare a few words, is this the most tired you've felt on all the days, on all the rides? And if so, maybe you're feeling that 160 that you put in last night to give yourself only 100 to go this afternoon.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I mean, I did knock my knee earlier as well, and it's kind of, I think I pulled something in the back of my leg, which is why I was just trying to stretch it out there. I mean, yeah, it feels like I'm going to cramp up in a minute, but push for it. I mean, I got a stitch the other day for the first time on 100 kilometers. So I was like, after about 40 odd days, I think it was a delayed reaction. But yeah, I mean, I've done it, so I'll push for it easy.
Yeah, come on, you can keep this going. You've almost got to break this down. If you could hear Ian and Rebecca talking there, you've got to try and break this down into little chunks. 6 fours plus a little bit of change. You've definitely got this, and you've got to think about that moment at the finish. I know Rhea Doherty will be rejoining us at some point from the Big Issue Foundation, just to reiterate their gratitude, not only for the money, but for the publicity you brought to the cause of a charity that could easily have gone totally forgotten in a time like this, where many people's focus, quite understandably, is on putting food on their own table. They might forget about the local homeless community who relies so heavily, and have done since 1991, on the money that comes from selling the magazines. So, you know, you've done a fantastic job here, and it goes way beyond the money. And there's a lot of love coming in for you over social media, on the Just Giving page, on our YouTube page. And Chris, just keep those mentions coming in my ear, and we'll read them out to give Jacob some inspiration. There've been some great cyclists. By the way, whilst you carry on, Jacob, I'm just going to mention to Ian and Rebecca an incredible cycling club. And forgive me if you both already know this story. Are you both familiar with the Tetbury Velos? Tetbury is a town in Gloucestershire, very close to where I live. And Chris and I, who's in my ear, we've been working on showcasing people doing sports and games at home and so on, which is the whole premise of Lockdown Live. And it was brought to our attention that a brilliant cycling club in Tetbury were raising money for a 28-year-old Fran who's battling a very, very serious brain condition at the moment. And they've had a fantastic weekend of fundraising, and I'm trying to think of other ways to help them. Cycling communities have come together at this time. Are either of you familiar with Fran's story from Tetbury?
No, I'm not.
What about you, Rebecca?
No, me neither. It's not something that I've been sort of filled in on.
Yeah, well, I may contact you separately after this to see what we might be able to do to further help the family. But basically, Fran, I don't know Fran personally. I've been speaking to his best mates, and we featured them on this weekend's Lockdown Live. Fran is a massive cycling fan and a really decent club performer for the Tetbury Velos. And he was supposed to cycle John O'Groats to Land's End, or sorry, other way around, Land's End to John O'Groats this year. But he has a very rare, serious form of brain lining cancer. And he got some very, very sad news about his short to medium term prospects. I think you can read between the lines there as to what I'm alluding to there. And the whole community in Tetbury, it's a beautiful little town, not just the Velos. They all decided to come together and do the miles for Fran because he's not in a position to ride his bike at the moment. And they had something like 320, it's a small town, 320 walks, 400 rides. They covered, they rather than doing the, 867 or something, it's quite a random mileage from John O'Groats to Land's End. They circumnavigated the globe, between 1,000 of them, on Fran's behalf, and they've raised some money. Fran is a self-employed stonemason who is unable to work for both reasons, because he's poorly and because he's under lockdown and doesn't get any support. They've managed to raise a huge amount of money for his wife and his 4-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son. And I think there's lots of other things we can do along with the Tetbury Velos, along the lines of their colours being pink. So I'm thinking, I've got a few ideas, and I might, if I may, I might tap both of you up about this after we finished waxing lyrical about Jacob, because it seems to me, from the likes of Jacob and all the other cycling challenges and what the Tetbury Velos have done for Fran, the cycling community is a strong one, and it's a cohesive force. And with so much success and so much interest in the sport, stories like Fran's and achievements like Jacob's could be put out to a hell of a lot of people.
Absolutely. You've got our email addresses, Rob. Tap us up and we'll be in touch after. I'm afraid I have to jump for a work meeting. I'll be back for the closing kilometres. Keith, Jacob, legends. Crack on. See you in a bit. Yeah.
Coming cream as well.
That was Ian just temporarily saying goodbye. I think we've still got Rebecca. I just saw her fleetingly there in one of my screens. Can't see her now, but yeah, has she gone as well?
Oh, I'm still here.
All right, cool.
I keep having to flick between screens, so I'm not sure if I'm appearing in the right place.
That's okay. We can hear you, and that's the most important thing. So, yeah, just sort of going back to what I was alluding to a minute or two ago, it really seems as though the cycling community is a very, very close one.
It really is. And again, this is something that I've been talking a lot about over the last few days, because there have been so many incredible stories shared, incredible fundraising efforts that have come together through the cycling community. And I've definitely seen the best of it. A lot of people will have heard of G's NHS Zwift shifts that he started about a week ago now, where he took the average NHS bit of a tongue twister. He took the shift of an NHS worker, and he said, okay, so that's going to be 12 hours on average. I'm going to ride back to back 12-hour shifts. And he did that on the Zwift virtual platform that Ian was mentioning earlier, and myself included. So many people went and rode along with him. Just so many people came together for that, and just apps. I'd have to check what the figure's up to now, because it's been absolutely mind-blowing. But that was just one of many initiatives that the cycling industry and the cycling fan base, everyone came together. And as you say, I think it's so important that we're putting whatever we can out there, because people have got the time to really dedicate to helping and listening at this time.
Yeah, and the other thing I've noticed when I've been out on my once a day, as we've been calling it in our house, on my runs, what's been really nice to see is usually when I go running around the lanes here, I see what I perceive to be, from a non-expert's point of view, very fancy bikes with, teams of guys and women who look like they're totally in tune with what they're doing, and they're at a really high club level. But what's also been really nice, I've seen old people out on bikes that look like they haven't been ridden outdoors for decades. So it's great, because cycling is like running in that regard. If there's a bike, you can cycle. It doesn't have to be X percentage wind resistant. You don't have to be able to read the watts of every single rotation. You don't have to have cleats. You can get out there, breathe in the fresh air, get the wind in your face. It is an accessible sport. And I've seen all sorts of types of bikes out there when I've been out running. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. and that is a story I hear so often, is people say, oh, I had a bike in the shed gathering dust and thought I'd dig it out and sort the chain out a little bit, and away they go. And I think, yeah, it's really encouraged a lot of people to think, how can I get a little bit of exercise every day? How can I have a bit of fun, perhaps with the family? And we've definitely seen so many people out riding. And I think, you know, I think it's also closed the gap a little bit in my mind, between the very elite pro end of cycling and people that are just getting out for 20 minutes on their own or with their family. And I think I've really felt that as well, in terms of what we were mentioning with the pro community, really communicating more, doing a lot more Instagram, Facebook Lives, things like this, charity fundraisers, and they're speaking to people of all levels of cycling and saying, come along, have a ride with us, albeit in the virtual world. And I think that's changed that view on accessibility as well.
That's great words. Now, we've got someone else who's joined us. A very good afternoon to Phil Parry from BBC Radio London Sport. And Phil, I gather you've had some quite good chats with Jacob, and you've been beating the drum and getting people interested, and you've played your role in helping him to get over the 10 grand target, which he has smashed in such style over the last couple of hours.
It's amazing, isn't it, what Jacob's done so far? Yeah, I mean, we've featured him on BBC Radio London. We're featuring all sorts of good works and charity fundraisers and people who are going out there and doing their bit, whether it's people who are actually just making some scrubs for local hospitals or raising funds as Jake's doing, which is absolutely tremendous. We came across him a few weeks ago. We featured his story. We've made a little video out of him as well. I think he was in the Alps at the time. He'd created his own little alpine, you've probably seen it, his own little alpine backdrop, and he's been an amazing story. And this is when he described it, saying, well, he would have talked about it no doubt, but described it saying, I didn't really realise it sounded great, the Tour de Flat, the Tour de France, and then suddenly realised it's 3,500 kilometres on an exercise bike in your flat. It's amazing. And you were just talking about your runs there, Rob. It sort of puts my runs into some sort of perspective. He's been doing this hour after hour after hour. It's an amazing achievement, and more power to his elbow, and hopefully more funds can come in. We'll continue to talk about his story. We're going to feature him again tomorrow on the sports program or whatever. But yeah, he's awe-inspiring, and I know he deserves his whatever bubbly he's going to get, whatever fizzy drink he's going to get at the end of this, down the virtual Champs-Elysees. He's going to deserve every single drop, I think, in a few kilometres' time.
Yeah, he certainly is. And I guess I used to live in London for many, many years, and now we live in the countryside. I guess it's really important, because Jacob was explaining before we came on that he has stuck very strictly to the government's recommendations. It's easier to go out on a run when you turn out of your front door and you're already on a country lane. I guess in London, what you've had to do is try and encourage people to get that physical release indoors. So the exercise bike has been a great vent for Jacob's frustrations at spending so much time indoors. Have you got a sense as well? I mean, you've mentioned you've been for a few runs. Has there hardly been anybody on the streets in London?
No, I think timing is also a really important thing, actually, in London. As you say, it depends where in London. Where I live, it is a little bit greener, and we've got access to some meadows and whatever, so we've been able to get out to there. But even then, and towpaths, canal towpaths and river towpaths, but it's got very busy, as you've seen. Cycling actually is depending again on your time, has not been such a bad pursuit, because you can stay off the pavement. So myself and my son have been out on the bike, and that's actually been a way of staying away from necessarily people who are walking. But I think it's timing. I go out a little bit later in the day. I know people who go out earlier in the morning. But yeah, there was a challenge, I think, a while ago, getting hold of turbo trainers. When people realised lockdown was coming, I think suddenly they went up in price, and also the availability became a little bit more difficult. So I think people realised they were going to have to somehow use whatever they could, whatever technology they could, be it an old exercise bike or be it a trainer, put it in the backyard or whatever to try and at least get the legs pumping. And we're all doing, I suppose, people are trying to do as much as they can exercise, but this, what's Jake's doing, what other people have done. You know, I spoke to Big G about 4 hours into his first day, and he was already saying, "Cool, this is actually I'm feeling it a bit." And you know, it's very different, isn't it? I mean, you know, those of us who are used to being out, as you were saying earlier, Rob, out on a bike with a bit of freedom, with just all the time of all day, if you want, to suddenly restrict yourself is a bit more difficult, isn't it? So I think it's trying to find ways of occupying yourself when you're not going anywhere. That's been the challenge, I would have thought, for Jake.
Yeah, and he's Jacob. Just I was going to come back to Rebecca for another question in a moment. What's the how many kilometers left? Last time you told us it was 27. What are you down to now, big fella?
That was my boss on the phone as well. That's what I took on the phone.
Your boss ringing you whilst you're trying to finish 3.5K. What is he? Some kind of slave driver?
No, it was just they got everyone on a Zoom call to cheer me on, but I didn't realise he was going to call me whilst I was talking to you guys. So yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, that's fantastic. So how long left? How many Ks?
19.3.
Get in less than 20K, less than a half marathon. Rebecca, just to bring you back in again. I've had a few, when I've been injured from running, I've had a few goes on a Peloton bike that a friend of mine has got. And I was amazed at how hard you can push yourself on an exercise bike indoors. It's by no means the weak relation, is it? If you get the right program, and we can see Keith Farquharson really drenched in sweat there, reliving Geraint's win in 2018, doing the whole tour. He's going through cancer treatment at the moment. So we've got another motivational guy, middle left of picture, if you're watching with all of us on together. Those bikes are no joke indoors, are they, Rebecca? You can absolutely annihilate yourself on some of those indoor programs.
Oh, you definitely can. Yeah. And I was going to come back also to Geraint Thomas's Swift shifts for the NHS, because as I mentioned, I rode with him. But to put this in perspective, I stayed at his pace for 1 hour on the Sunday, on the, I think that was the final day. And I really, no exaggeration, I was hanging on for 1 hour at that pace. And to see him day in, day out doing that all day long without a break, or at least a significant one, I think it just allows people like us to get on and actually see just what level they're riding at for that amount of time, and making it look like he's just cruising. Yeah, it's all relative. But yeah, I've been riding a lot on the Zwift platform, and it is just so addictive because there's so many people on it that you can meet up with. You're always chasing the carrot and trying to keep up with people, and before you know it, you've done a great deal at a really high effort. So yeah, I think it's been brilliant, and I was lucky enough to sort out a turbo trainer before they sort of sold out globally. But I know a lot of brands are trying to restock them because people are just thinking, wow, I could do this in my living room, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, if you have only got, that's what I found with the Peloton that I had to go on. If I only had half an hour and I was up at my mate's house, you can absolutely thrash yourself in half an hour. You can finish that session feeling like you have actually worked, which is yes. Great. You know, if you don't have a huge amount of time, you want to feel like you've done something. And it's really weird how competing against somebody virtually, even if someone you don't know, or, you know, when you do the same program numerous times and you think, well, hang on, I'm normally about 50th here, and this one is normally just behind me, and he or she has suddenly jumped up to 41st. It's ridiculous how you can get competitive, even in a virtual context. It's so odd, that, isn't it?
Massively. And I'm really enjoying that aspect. I've become a bit of a gamer, I think. I just absolutely love it. And I think, you know, having all the graphics and the avatars, and you can, you know, change your hairstyle. It's just brilliant.
Phil, just bringing you back in as you cover the sport for BBC Radio London. I was asking James Campbell, the Scottish javelin thrower who did the 6-metre back garden marathon a little earlier. We got him in for some moral support with Jacob, and I think he's coming back in to see him at the end.
Yeah.
How long, this is just a general sporting question whilst we wait for Jacob to crack on with the last few K. how long do you think it's going to take the elite men and women in all sorts of sports to get back up to the levels they were at before lockdown? Because it's not, although keeping fit is great, but in something that requires an immense amount of skill as well as fitness, say football or rugby or cricket, wouldn't there be, even amongst the very best, a kind of rustiness of touch that would need time to come back? It's going to be a different elite sporting landscape for the first month or so after we return, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it will be, won't it? I mean, we don't know when those sort of sports are going to return. We were sort of speculating on a call this morning with a couple of colleagues of which sports would come back first, and you sort of almost half jokingly think, well, the sports that will come back first will be the ones where you can actually still have some sort of social distance. So I suppose in cycling, time trialing would be one way of coming back, without being too sort of light-hearted about it. Bowls, for example, would be something, because you could be out there and not necessarily get too close. But when it comes to team sports and that gameplay that you need, and obviously road cycling is a team sport. There's so much that goes on within the peloton that it's just having that feel, that touch, that game sort of knowledge that will have to come back. So I mean, we've been shut down. Sport has been shut down for 2 months, month and a half so far in the UK. It's not going to come back. Certainly, team sport's not going to come back for a little while. So the pre-season, it have to be a proper pre-season again. They will be certainly rusty, and even the fitness. And again, elite athletes would tell me more, but the sort of fitness that you can do, I know that there's concerns that if you are more restricted to sort of doing treadmill running or just static bike training like this, it's a different type. Your muscles are going to work in slightly different ways, aren't they, than if you're in a competitive situation. So I would imagine there's going to be fears of the types of soft tissue injury you may get from all sorts of sports, because suddenly you're in a different, you're needing to react in a different way. It's going to be a test on all those muscles that you can't really necessarily simulate in any sort of circumstance. So it will take a while. It could make for some very interesting and unpredictable outcomes, I would have thought.
And just following on from that great insight, Rebecca, one thing that perhaps will be fascinating to see, not just in cycling, but in any sport, if we end up coming back to elite sport under a circumstance of, as they say, behind closed doors, there'll be certain men and women at an elite level who can block out the fact that there's no crowd and still produce the same level of adrenaline. But there'll be others who psychologically find that more difficult, I think. That's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, as we've all been saying, there's just so many variables at the moment, and it's very, very difficult to answer any of these things at the moment. But yeah, as you say, psychology is just such a massive thing, and some people channel it, some people block it out. So yeah, I think that's a factor. But I've been speaking to a lot of the pros out in Italy and Spain, and a lot of them are saying they're actually pretty happy with where their form is. They're training pretty well indoors. However, the thing that they've noted is, of course, lockdowns have been so different globally, and some people have been locked down for a lot longer. Some countries are still riding, the pros are allowed to ride outdoors for quite some miles, and a lot of them have been doing that, whereas others in other parts of the world haven't. And like you were saying about the sort of different simulation to what it would be like if you're actually out on the road, and the different movement and the different sort of muscle engagement. So I think that's something that the athletes are looking at, is actually, yes, when we do get to a point that we can come back to competition, what form is that going to take? And actually, are some athletes going to be on a different playing field because they've been riding outdoors? We've been in the static trainer because our lockdown was of a different sort.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point, actually. I hadn't anticipated that angle, because, of course, if you are dealing at the very, very higher echelons of elite level, it's global. Similarly, I work on snooker, and the World Snooker Championship should have been on now, and it looks like there's a chance that it may well come back in August. And there's talk there that everybody needs to have access to a table for a month before the World Championship, because some of the elite players have a table at home, and they are at the moment a huge advantage over those who have previously been going to a local club that's currently closed, because those guys have not had access to a table for 6 weeks, whereas the others, and there aren't many of them who've got tables at home, but there are some, they could have been practicing 6 hours a day behind closed doors. So it's a fascinating time at the moment in elite sport. And I guess above anything else, Phil, you'll be exactly the same as myself and Rebecca. Forget about the money and forget about the events we're no longer working on this year. I just miss the job. I miss the sport. And I can't wait to be watching elite sport again. And I'm sure both of you are exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's the sport and it's the glory and it's the drama and it's the stories and it's the highs and the lows that really drive it. I know, obviously, in professional sport that it is a business and it's a profession, and that's people's livelihoods, and that's also very, very important. But as a sports lover and a sports fan, I mean, you can watch back old episodes. You can, I mean, I'm sort of looking at you've got your bookshelf behind you, Rob. I've planned this really badly. I've got some pictures behind me. I didn't go bookshelf, which was a really bad idea, wasn't it? But I'm just looking at, cycling is I think one of the reasons why I like it. So many other people, I think, really gravitate, because the stories in cycling, there are so many. I'm looking at a couple of books that I've got on the bookshelf here. Will Fotheringham's The Badger, for example, is there. And also Pete Cosm's book, about the first tour. And there's so many great stories that happen within cycling. And that's the thing about sport. Every single event generates a story. Every single event generates a hero or a villain, or, someone who emerges and becomes a pin-up just for that particular event. And yeah, those are the things that we miss. And then talking about it, we've spent so long talking about what could happen, what should happen, what's not. The first week or so of lockdown, it got a little bit sort of, I don't know, disheartening, because all we talked about is this isn't going to happen. That's being postponed. And now maybe we're just starting about, well, when will things happen? When's the tour going to happen? Is it going to be pushed into September? I think everyone's latching on to the potential of something coming back, because we are missing it. And yeah, regardless of work, regardless of commentary and coverage and reporting, it's just watching something that's new and fresh, because the one thing about sport is it's completely unscripted. So you turn up on the day, or you turn on the telly, or you turn on the radio, or go online, and you don't know what's going to happen. You really don't. If we knew it was going to happen, it wouldn't be sport. We wouldn't love it. So that lack of sort of spontaneity in what can happen in the afternoon is certainly being, or in the after, or the day, or the event. That's what I miss. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and also going back to you, Rebecca, before we have another chat with Jacob, who's getting ever closer to his finish line at 5 to 5. And if you've been with us all throughout the afternoon, you deserve a medal for your stamina test, let alone the 3,500 kilometers that Jacob's cracking on with. Rebecca, it's funny, isn't it? I think the way we consume television products nowadays is very much on demand, to use that phrase. My wife and I will sit and watch a box set. We don't watch traditional television that much. But the one thing I think that will always be preferred live, the one thing is sport, because we've all been in situations where, for whatever reason, for one thing or another, you haven't been able to watch something live, but you've managed to record it and turn your phone off. It's not the same, is it? Even if you don't know when you sit down, because if there's 5 minutes of that match that's boring, you're tempted to fast forward it. So we are missing doing something collectively together. And that is the essence of sport, that you want to see it and you need to see it at the very moment it's happening.
You're absolutely right. And I think, of course, with that shift of more digital and more consumption in that way, we are all connected on social media, and like you say, you want to switch off your Twitter timeline and desperately not find out what's happened if you can't see things live. And for me, I'm often, sure you guys are in the same boat, you're often working on one piece of coverage, but there's something else going on live, and you're just like, don't talk to me about that. I need to catch up on that afterwards. And I do find it really heartening that we all love this so much, and that element of it, because as much as I do love binge watching on Netflix, I absolutely love sitting down and doing that at the moment, that's for sure. But you do have to reflect and think, is there, are we still going to have live TV in that element? And we need it for sport. And I think that just reaffirms it. I've got a quick question for you. Is that books behind you or lanyards?
No, I was going to correct Phil, actually. I don't know how clear the picture is. It's loads and loads of my lanyards. Those ones are my athletics ones, which make up the majority of my collection. And then you've got Olympics and Paralympics and other weird and wonderful things I've done internationally down there. I was saying earlier on in the feed, we lived in London and we didn't have much space, and I collected all my lanyards. I've been fortunate enough to be a broadcaster for 21 years, and I always kept them and put them in a bag and said to my wife, if ever we live somewhere with enough space, let's get them out and do something with them. We had a garage at our house, and we're not really into cars, so we had a garage converted into my office. So I said to Becky, right, can we do something with my lanyards? So she's just kind of color coordinated them and hung them up. But it's really weird. I've actually forgotten that they're there. And then in the course of doing all these FaceTimes and Zooms and so on, people start talking about the events I've worked on. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize you knew me. And they said, yeah, look over your shoulder. Oh, yeah, it's all the lanyards. So, yeah, I'm really glad I didn't chuck them all out because, I want my grandchildren to maybe they'll look and go, wow, Granddad was quite interesting. That was in an era when they actually went to the events and they didn't just commentate from home, which is probably what we'll end up doing a lot more of in the future. So, yeah, just a collection of my lanyards. Chris, just double checking. Please talk again in my ear. How long left for the big JHG? 11.5 kilometers. Rebecca, come on, you must have some motivational words for Jacob. I know you do some coaching. You've co-authored a few books and written some in your own right as well. Let's give this guy the encouragement he needs to drag himself through the last few K.
Oh, I would just say it's such a short distance now. I know that's very easy for me to say from my comfy chair sat here, but I can really see that you've had to get off a couple of times because you're probably cramping up, but you're riding so smoothly. It's going to fly past, and we are all behind you. We're all here. We're all supporting you. Are absolutely incredible.
How are you feeling, big fella?
All right. I'm kind of, I think we're on for a PB of the 100K. It's, yeah, what have we been doing now? We almost at 3 hours and we're on 90K. So it's another 20 minutes and we'll be done. So, yeah, that's 20 minutes off my fastest time. So, yeah, good way to go out.
Wow, we should have been doing a live broadcast for every single one of the 41 rides. Then you'd have probably finished it in 36 days instead. Phil, on behalf of those covering it and listening and watching in London, a few words of motivation for the big fella there as he heads into the last 6 and a bit miles.
I think he's actually won over a lot of hearts and minds. And I think when we first spoke, he was sort of, I think, a third of the way into the challenge already, that he'd done it. And, at that point, it was just starting to look a little bit more doable, I think, wasn't it? When you get to a certain point in a run or a challenge, and you go, okay, fine, well, I got this far, and okay, I can go a bit more. But now when you get to this point, he's on the Champs-Élysées, isn't he? Let's face it, he's going round and around at this point. So it literally is, it's the closing lap. The crowds are out in huge numbers. It's the equivalent on the marathon, I suppose, now of being on the embankment. No, it's not even that. It's heading towards, I suppose, Westminster and the Houses of Parliament. So, the crowds are going to be huge. The finish line is so close. So many people are so supportive. And I think that's what's been brilliant. We've had people getting in touch with us and reacting to what Jacob's been doing and sort of almost incredulous, thinking what he's doing, what everyone you speak to. So, he's so close now, and he's just doing a great thing because, at this time, one of the areas maybe didn't get necessarily forgotten about, but the big issue when lockdown happens, one of the areas that people being out on the street is a huge revenue driver for those people who are selling the big issue, and it makes such a big difference to people's lives. And what Jacob's done is making a massive difference to people's lives. by racing this amount of money and the profile. So, you know, he should be double proud. I mean, proud of obviously what he's doing with achieving this, but he should also be amazingly proud for the difference he's making to people's lives out there.
Yeah, I hope you can hear all this, Jacob, and you're taking it all in and giving yourself a metaphorical pat on the back. We wish we were there in the room with you, but then we wouldn't be under lockdown. It is what it is. It's a fantastic effort, mate, and you've just got to grit your teeth and grind out this last 17 or 18 minutes. You are so nearly there.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's mad, isn't it? I think almost 9.5k to go, so might try and pick up the pace a bit if I can.
Well, it's like a cartoon. Those legs are pumping like pistons. You're like Popeye on the spinach. It's absolutely incredible. So Chris Hoy, eat your heart out. There's definitely been an increase in tempo there. I think your body can sense the finish line, and it's like, right, I've hammered myself for 41 and a half days or 40 and a half days. I'm going to absolutely smash myself into the ground here. And then hopefully you won't collapse too low in the seat for us to be able to see you across the line and see you pop the champagne. So are you actually, speaking of the moment of victory, as it were, are you a champagne man, or will it be a cold beer, or do you need a drink of water first?
I think I'll probably hit the water first, and then the guys at work have delivered a bottle of shampoo for me to crack into. So not your head and shoulders either. They've delivered a bottle of Moe, so I'll probably crack that. I bought a bottle of Prosecco to bathe in, but I think it might be a bit too... I was going to spray myself with it like the actual tour, but you fancy cleaning that up after this now.
Well, yeah, because that's the funny thing, because it's not like a Cavendish or Froome or Thomas or Pendleton moment where you can spray the champagne and then walk away. You're still in your own flat. So don't completely trash the place, because there isn't a set of cleaners coming in to sort it out afterwards. You'll have to sleep in that.
I'll probably lose my deposit as well, which nobody wants to do. So, yeah, I think if I do that, I'm doing it in the bath. I think that's something else for a different website.
Yeah, don't try this at home if you're tuning in. Well, listen, it's keep going. You're almost there. The mighty oaks out of acorns grow. I'm always telling my son that. Initially £1,000, then you suddenly beat 5. You're on 8,200 when you started the last 100k. We're comfortably over 10 grand here. You're into 5 figures, and I think if someone had told you on March the 22nd, when you got on that old rusty clothes horse of an exercise bike, if someone had said to you, A, that you'd finish it on May the 1st, and B, that you'd be over 10 grand, you'd have probably thought they were having a laugh.
Yeah, probably. I mean, to knock like 21 days off the target, it's a bit of a mad one in itself, and to then extend the targets, the fundraising targets, and break them. It's just the icing on the cake, really. So, yeah, I'll be glad to get off and stretch my legs out properly, because I'm really feeling it in my right leg at the minute. But we'll get there.
Yeah, we are, mate. If we could possibly give you a hug, we certainly would. And I don't know if you're in a relationship at the moment, or whether you're at some point going to go through internet dating. It's certainly an interesting ingredient to add to your profile if you are ever into online dating, that you can say you've done Le Tour de Flat, racing 3,500 kilometers. It will certainly give you something to talk about on the first date.
I mean, it's a bit more impressive than those tiger pictures, and a bit more acceptable than the tiger pictures you see all over online dating. But yeah, who knows? I mean, I don't think this is a great advertisement for myself at the minute. Seeing as I'm wearing a yellow jersey that's about 2 sizes too small, I thought I was going to be able to fit in a bit better, but needs must and all that.
Hey,
And-
listen, I think if you went on a first date and you made mention of this, if the other person wasn't impressed, there'd be something wrong with them. It's a tremendous effort. And we welcome back Jamie Parkins from Just Giving. Great, Jamie, that you guys have given such prominence on your hugely in-demand website and services to what Jacob's doing here. Comfortably over the 10 grand. He might not quite get to the 15, but you know what? From a starting position where he wanted to put a grand in the kitty for the Big Issue Foundation, he's absolutely smashed this. And there'll be more than a few people who've tuned in and become aware of his story for the first time, thanks to you guys giving this such a high profile position on your site.
Yeah, you're welcome, Rob. I would also say I think the stuff that you guys are all doing together today will help take Jacob's story go further, and we know that lots of donations do come in afterwards. So I'm still going to hold him to that 15 grand target. I think he'll do it. Jacob, a bit of a Parisian touch for you here. I thought I'd dress up as your honorary Frenchman on the finish line. I've gone. I don't have the beret, I'm afraid, but I've got the stripes for you.
Nice.
So, don't ask me to say anything in French though, but apart from maybe.
Well, I mean, the only French I can speak has come out of Derek Trotter's mouth. So, may we and au revoir.
And probably bonjour as well.
Yeah, buongiorno. Yeah, bonjour.
Oh, buongiorno. Yeah, that's right. Del Boy, one of the great characters. Maybe you should revisit a couple of the Only Fools and Horses box sets over the coming days. Speaking of box sets, Jacob, we are now, I know you're still working, but obviously we're heading into the weekend. What would your binge watch of choice be over the coming days? Because let's face it, if you lie horizontal on the sofa to move only for food and ablutions, I reckon you've earned that right. So if you do lie horizontal with the remote in your hand for 5 hours, what will you be watching? And keep it clean. There are kids.
Yeah, well, Disney Plus, obviously. No, I've actually started because obviously this has been taking up so much of my evening. I started watching The Simpsons again from like episode 1. And while this has been going on, I've got for about 20 seasons of it. So I don't know if
20 seasons.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to continue watching that and get to I think there's 30 seasons. But I might continue watching that. Or, I don't know, I've kind of missed out on the whole Tiger King craze. So I might have to see what that's all about.
Yeah, by the way, I mean, we are focusing on you, Jacob. Don't make no mistake. I've seen the Tiger King thing advertised and not watched it. Phil, Jamie, Rebecca, have you seen any of this? Is it really about owners of tigers? What's it all about?
I'm ashamed to say I have seen it. I think the good news, Jacob, is I don't recall any scenes on it where there's a bike involved, so you might not get any sort of awful flashback or anything like that.
Yes, Steve.
Is it good, Jamie?
It's what's the word? It feels like a sort of a naughty treat. It's a trashy documentary, but it's very well done.
Okay, Phil, what have you and your family been watching in London to while away the hours when you're not exercising and working and sleeping?
Yeah, that's that's a good question. We haven't seen that Tiger King yet, but it's on the list. I need to watch. It's been a real mix actually. We've caught up yet again with Last Kingdom. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those, but the 4th series has now been dropped. So we've been sort of watching those. I've been actually staying away from. We started watching the Movistar documentary. Which was me and my son have been watching that, just catching up with all sorts of stuff. The draft last weekend from the NFL actually was something that we watched. It was quite fascinating just watching that as a virtual event because that's such a big.
Was that in people's basements?
Do it virtually. It's extraordinary, really. So just I don't know what else are they watching. We have been banging through all sorts of films and experimented with the Disney Channel opportunity to watch some of the Disney films. And yeah, just as much as we possibly kept, not too much. And then getting on, you know, my son's been obviously gaming a little bit when he can.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you've been limiting that. How long left, Jacob, before we get to what Rebecca's been binging on for the last few weeks? How long? 5.5 kilometers to go. 4.5.
Oh my goodness! Yes.
But he's nearly there. So Rebecca, what have you briefly? What have you been indulging in terms of Netflix and Amazon and all the rest of the on-demand services that are out there?
Yeah, so I've watched all of the Movistar documentary series, which I thought was really brilliant. It's such a rare insight into the cycling team. But I have also binge watched Gangs of London in quite a short period of time, and it one of my friends is in the cast.
Wow!
I won't go into too much detail because I know not everyone has binge watched it at the rate that I have. But it's the most violent series I think I've ever watched, more than Breaking Bad, anything else like that. And it's been one of those where I've binge watched before bedtime and then had some crazy dreams that I'm in these scenarios. So I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but it's brilliant.
Wow, it's also strange when you watch something when you've got a mate. A very good friend of mine has made it quite high up in Sky News, and he's quite often at the Houses of Parliament. But whenever I see him, despite the fact that I know what he's saying is really articulate and has real gravitas, I just picture him being on the lash when we were students in a nightclub, and it's really hard to take him seriously.
Can't shake that one.
Ria's back with us. Jacob, Ria, well, we'll get to you in just a moment. Jacob, how long?
3.5.
Come on, 3.5 kilometers. Ria, we'll gloss over your box set binging and get back to the issue at hand, which is how much money this guy has raised over 41 days. He is almost there. If people are just kind of picking this up, having dipped out of our coverage earlier, where have you been? But no, it is the kind of thing that you pick up and put down, and hopefully people are tuning in now as they finish work and begin to think about a beer and a weekend off. So we have touched on some of these discussion points earlier, but he's put a very important cause that could have been forgotten right back on the dinner table at a really important time, hasn't he? It's not just the 10 grand, it's the public reminder that these vendors are out there and they still need our help.
Absolutely. He is pedaling so hard. Those legs are moving so fast. They're like a blur. And the reason he's doing that is to support big issue vendors across the country. So the Big Issue Foundation is the charity that's set up to specifically support big issue vendors. They lost their income overnight when the lockdown happened. A lot of them didn't have secure accommodation, and the funds that he's raising are making sure, you know, everyone got indoors, that they could keep electricity on, that they could have credit on their phone to stay in touch with services, so that they had food on their tables, and so that they felt supported during this time. Jacob has a local vendor he supported, and that's what inspired him, and that's what he should be thinking about right now. Every time you want to give up, Jacob, think about Stevie and all the vendors like him that you are doing this for. Every single revolution of that bike is raising funds for people that a lot of people have forgotten about during this time. He's amazing. He knows he's amazing. I hope he should know he's amazing. So he needs to just keep going because you're so close.
He is. Just in the time you've been talking, he's gone from 2.5K to 2.2K. Chris,
Yes.
in my ear, keep those updates coming because I don't want him to have to talk over this last little bit. He's now down to 2K, 2 kilometers left. He has cycled 3,498 kilometers. This is a guy who, by his own admission, was a big old unit, perhaps ever so slightly out of shape, who got on an exercise bike that had been used for a clothes horse for years. The 28-year-old senior art director at an ad agency deciding that, having befriended a homeless big issue vendor by the name of Stevie, who lightened up his day and took the mickey every time he was late for work, he decided, as a tribute to Stevie, to keep going, to keep putting himself under pressure, to sustain his own mental well-being on this incredible journey of self-discovery that's happened within the confines of his own four walls. This is the flat he rents. And if you are just getting home from work, metaphorically speaking, you've been in the other room, you're now chilling out. He says, what you can see here is about half the size of my flat. But it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be expensive. This is a man fueled by a desire to do something positive in a difficult situation. Those legs are an absolute blur. He's got 1 kilometre to go. He's almost there. He's adjusting the glasses. That's Ria Doherty. She is the individual giving and communications manager for the Big Issue Foundation. There are so many people raising money for so many different causes, but this is the moment that we put Jacob Hill-Gowing front and center. That's why Just Giving have decided to put him right on their homepage and give him so much airtime and so much credit. 0.6 of a kilometre, 0.5 of a kilometre. He's looking at the camera. Metaphorically, we're all there, giving him a virtual hug. 400 meters to go. Jamie is tweeting congratulations. This is a guy who has smashed his target. He got on his bike on the 22nd of March to try and raise 1,000 quid for the Big Issue Foundation. 200 meters to go. Not only did he raise £1,000, he raised £5,000. He started today with £8,226. And here he is, Jacob Hill-Gowing, the 28-year-old from London, the senior art director at an ad agency, is the toast of a charity and a nation today. He has put the great into Britain. He's smashed his fundraising tally, and in 41 days, 41 days,
amazing,
he has completed Le Tour de Flat. Jacob Hill-Gowing, you are an absolute legend. And mate, you can stop. It's over. You've done it.
Wow. Thank you, Jacob.
Right, someone call an ambulance.
Jacob, if you have any words and breath left, what are your instinctive reactions in the aftermath of the greatest physical challenge you've ever undertaken and conquered?
Just mental, really, isn't it? Just like thinking, what, 40 days ago, I was doing like 45k. And to come and save a little bit in the locker there for a sprint finish and get over that is just absolutely nuts. I just want to do a big shout out to, everyone that's supported me over the last 40 days. I think you all know you are, a lot of them on this call. Big shout out to Stevie and all of the Big Issue vendors and all of the people at the Big Issue and the Big Issue Foundation. Really, I think if we can, to all the vendors out there, don't lose hope in that someone hasn't got your corner, because there's people do care, and we want to make sure that everyone, no matter where you are in society, no matter where you come from, kind of gets through this this virus and this lockdown, and make sure that everyone's looked after, and that's the reason behind this. And I've obviously got personal interest with Stevie, but obviously I as we've gone along, I've seen all the stories that are coming out in the Big Issue. That sentiment is extended to all of you. It's I'm in your corner. The Big Issue's in your corner, and you haven't been forgotten about.
Jacob, it's so hard to try and convey the admiration and the emotion virtually, but I hope you have got a sense today as to how many people have sat up and noticed, even though you are on your own in your flat, as you have been since mid-March. I hope you have got a sense of how many people have got a a newfound respect for what you've done and the way you've conducted yourself. Your parents must be so proud of you, and your phone is going to light up like a Christmas tree right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a bit mad, isn't it? I'm a bit lost for words, really. And I don't really know. Don't really know how to react because it has been amazing. You know, the amount of people on this call today that have taken time out of their schedules and you know use their platform to try and spread this message is absolutely amazing. And the way that you guys keep doing that and have been doing that is absolutely phenomenal. So hats off to you guys as well, because you know no one would know about this challenge and I think what it's helped do is, you know, with everything that the Big Issue has been doing as well, is helped to make people help people remember that when everything else stops, the life of the vendors does too, and they need our support. So thank you everyone that's kind of given up their time today and helped to put this on the map a bit, because yeah, it's been absolutely well.
Well, you know, the greatest thing about this, Jacob, perhaps it's threefold. It's the money you've raised, it's the profile you've given to the Big Issue Foundation, but also maybe either people watching this afternoon or those who've heard the interviews that Chris has done on Scott and Mills, or that Phil has done on Radio London, or the people that Rebecca has told or Ian has told, and the people that Jamie has put this out to, and Rhea and all the other people. There might be somebody else out there in another flat or another house who looks at what you've done, and it might be the seed of an idea for them to go and do some fundraising, which will not only do great cause for another charity, but will work on their mental well-being if they're on their own as well. So the inspiration isn't just around what you've done specifically for the Big Issue Foundation. It's the message you've sent, and you might just have sown a few little ideas in a few other crazy minds around the country. And somebody, you've put down the flame here in fine style. Somebody somewhere else in Britain is about to pick it up. We don't know who they are or where they are, but somebody's going to pick up where you've left off. So the work and the momentum will continue.
I'm definitely going to be now for this, mate. The challenge has been laid down to you now, mate, to carry it on. So best of luck with what you're doing as well, mate, because it's absolutely phenomenal, especially with your story and the fact that you're actually doing the inclines and stuff as well. It's absolutely phenomenal. So good luck with that as well, mate, because I'll definitely be following along and watching with great interest. And if you ever want to, when you're somewhere in the French countryside, just give me a bell, because you know I can't speak.
Well, I'll give you some time to get ready.
Yeah, Jacob,
yes,
you must
before
be
you want to
knackered,
get back
but
on
you're
that.
a superstar.
Rob, you're in with the BBC, obviously. Is this early sports personality year contender?
Well, along with others, but yes, I think we should do an alternative sports personality of the year. How about that for all the people like Jacob, like Keith, like the back garden marathon guy, James Campbell? We should do an alternative sports personality. We are just about to finish. I'm going to say thank you to Rebecca, to Phil, to Jamie, to Rhea, to Keith, who's gone off, and to Jacob. Jacob, let's just finish with a couple of mentions here. These succinctly summarize the feeling that's out there for you as you crack open the champers. Just remember, you're cleaning it up, mate. Fantastic. On YouTube, Gavin Finney, a whole load of champagne bottle emojis. Helen Lindsay, whoop, whoop. Nick Barron, unreal. Niall Wharton, superstar. Callum Simpson, well done, Jakey. Amber Morin Faraway, amazing. Nick Barron, what a final sprint. Loads of hand clap emojis from Jason Fu. E. Johnson back on again, incredible. Well-deserved rest. Kimberly Douglas, incredible. Laura Walsh, incredible, you're a legend. Seb Hill, sports personality of the year, get the shampoo out. And Kimberly Douglas says, I'm not crying, it's you that should be crying. And Jamie Buchanan, wherever he is watching. He has written, absolutely incredible. You are, it has been, have a wonderful evening. Jacob Hill-Gowing, 3,500 kilometers, Le Tour de Flat nailed. You've been watching Lockdown Live. You've been watching a guy who has shown cojones in huge quantities. Jacob, go and enjoy your evening. Thanks for tuning in. Next time, we'll feature another celebrity in the making. Jacob, you've absolutely smashed that. We salute you. Goodbye.
Congratulations.